Do you like pink? Then this video is for you. But there will be no pink ponies, pink handbags, or pink mini pigs here. Instead, we're going to talk about the pink side of Antarctica. Yeah, this icy continent is not always white. In some places, it turns pink for very strange reasons. Let's take a tour of the pinkest places in Antarctica and uncover their secrets. Antarctica is home to many high mountains and volcanoes that hide all kinds of mysteries. One of them is pink rock. In West Antarctica, among the peaks of the Hudson Mountains, large boulders covered in a pink pigment lie scattered across the landscape. They've puzzled scientists for decades. These stones are made of granite. The pinkish hue of this rock is given by a mineral called feldspar. Pink granite can be found in many places around the world. But why are these rocks sitting among high mountains? Logically, you might assume they broke off from nearby peaks. But the problem is that the mountains themselves have no pink shade at all, which means someone or something removed these rocks from a large granite body and brought them here. But then, where is that massive block of granite? Well, scientists asked themselves the same question and launched a large-scale investigation. First, they analyzed the pink rocks and discovered that they formed about 175 million years ago, during the Jurassic period, when tyrannosaurs were walking the Earth. Hey, I wasn't around then. Well, what if some big, strong dinosaur simply dragged them here because it liked the color? It's a funny theory, but there has to be something else. Scientists decided to fly over the Hudson Mountains in a research aircraft equipped with unique geological sensors. Using special instruments and aerial surveys, they carried out precise gravity measurements and detected a geological signal beneath the Pine Island Glacier. The signal came from a massive granite body roughly half the size of Wales. Okay, now we know where the rocks came from. But how did it happen that gigantic granite deposits ended up beneath a glacier while these stones were scattered across mountain peaks? Well, tens of thousands of years ago, during the last ice age, the glacier in this region was much thicker than it is today. Millions of tons of solid ice pressed down on the granite below. The pressure was so intense that large chunks broke off from the massive pink rock and were pushed high into the mountains. But wait a minute, how is that even possible? A giant glacier presses down on a giant block of granite and somehow squeezes rocks out into mountain peaks? Well, first of all, a glacier is frozen water. In some places, it can melt and seep into cracks in the rock. When it freezes again, it expands and splits the rock apart. Second, glaciers move very slowly over tens and hundreds of thousands of years. A glacier grinds across the granite with its enormous weight, breaking it apart and pushing the smaller fragments along. And those small pink pieces are exactly what scientists found. It's like sandpaper moving across the surface of a wooden beam and scattering shavings in different directions. But why does this matter? Scientists can now better understand how glaciers move and change, and how they interact with the rock beneath them. Most importantly, they can see how Antarctica is changing as global temperatures rise. This helps us predict future climate changes on our planet. Now, let's come down from the high mountains and walk across the crunching snow. The white surface reflects sunlight and blinds you. You search for a darker spot to give your eyes a break, and suddenly you notice a large pink patch. It looks as if someone ate a watermelon here and spilled all the juice onto the snow. This phenomenon is called watermelon snow, but it has nothing to do with the fruit. The unique color is caused by a special type of algae called this. Hey, you try to pronounce this. Right now, these algae appear pink or red because they are in a dormant state. During their reproductive stage, they turn green. When you walk through a park and see yellow and brown leaves, you know it's autumn and the trees are preparing for winter. In Antarctica, instead of yellow leaves, there are pink algae. They turn red as they prepare for the long cold winter, and turn green again as the seasons change. But why do they do this? Well, the change in color helps them survive. White snow reflects sunlight and heat, but pink or green shades reduce reflectivity. The surface absorbs more heat, causing the snow to melt, and the more snow melts, the more water the algae receive. But are water and sunlight really enough for algae to live? Well, of course not. They also need nutrients. But how do they get them? The continent's residents provide the nutrients, and these residents are penguins. These adorable animals go to the bathroom, and their droppings fertilize the snow. Even a tiny amount of dust from penguin poo is enough to supply the algae with the nutrients they need. Now, scientists believe that in the future, pink snow will become much more widespread across Antarctica as temperatures continue to rise. So, if you ever find yourself on this continent with friends and spot pink snow, you can show off your knowledge and explain the science behind it. However, if someone feels tempted to taste the watermelon snow, don't let them. The snow may look like fruit sorbet, but the algae in it are toxic. And don't forget, it also contains particles of penguin doo-doo. So, pink rocks have a pale shade. Watermelon snow has a brighter pink. The colors are getting more intense. And our next phenomenon is hard even to call pink. It has a dark red tone and looks a little eerie. Just look at this. Red water pours out of a glacier, staining everything around it with an ominous color. It's been flowing here for hundreds and possibly even thousands of years. When researchers first noticed this waterfall in the early 20th century, they were shocked. For a long time, no one understood the nature of this phenomenon. People speculated why red water was flowing out of the glacier and what gave it that color. Was it even water? The imagination runs wild. But relax, it really is water. And it isn't actually red. It's transparent, just like the water that flows from our taps. It simply contains something special that changes color upon contact with oxygen and sunlight. Now think about what happens to iron when it gets wet. It oxidizes, forms rust, and turns reddish-brown. Roughly the same process happens here. The water inside the glacier contains a huge amount of iron. When it flows out and comes into contact with oxygen, it oxidizes and takes on this eerie color. This explanation seemed perfect, and scientists were confident in it until they discovered something more. They studied samples of the water and found iron-rich nanospheres. Now, nanospheres are tiny particles, about 100 times smaller than a human red blood cell. In addition to iron, the nanospheres from the waterfall also contain calcium, silicon, aluminum, and sodium. When these nanospheres come into contact with oxygen, they turn red. But where do these nanospheres come from? And why don't we find anything like this in the bottled water we drink? Well, this Antarctic water has been trapped inside the glacier for hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of years. In a way, it exists outside our planet's atmosphere in unique conditions. There's no light, no air, and everything is cold. Who knows what kinds of microorganisms live there and how they affect the water? Many things could be producing nanospheres and enriching the water with them. Scientists studied this waterfall not only to solve its mystery. They believe that if life can exist under such extreme conditions in Antarctica, it might also exist in similar environments on other planets. There are cold, sealed caves without sunlight and oxygen on Mars. What if microorganisms live there too? By studying the phenomena like this on Earth, we can better prepare for future research missions to Mars.
Scientists just drilled through about 1,700 feet of Antarctic ice and pulled up a record-breaking core. It's a 750-foot tube that reaches back about 23 million years. The core showed that this part of West Antarctica had been an open ocean back then. That means the ice sheet had collapsed before. And if it sinks again, global sea levels could rise enough to turn coastal cities into aquariums and rewrite the map of the world. To learn more, an international research team set up camp at a spot called Crary Ice Rise. It's like a giant frozen raft stuck to Antarctica, caught on rocky bumps on the seafloor. Those bumps act like a brake, helping hold back the inland ice. But warmer ocean water is starting to melt the raft from below. If the ice thins and lifts off those rocks, the brakes are gone, and the inland ice is going straight into the ocean. That is why scientists decided to drill here. Drilling a straight hole through 1/3 of a mile of ice sounds impossible. It can't be done with a regular drill. Instead, the crew had to use a custom hot water drill. It's basically a superheated pressure washer. It shoots near boiling water straight down to melt a vertical tunnel about 1 foot wide. The problem is, the ice tries to heal the hole shut. The continent itself is saying, nope. If the hot water stops flowing for even a little bit, the tunnel starts freezing again and the hole begins to close. And since they were in the middle of a frozen wasteland, they had to set up a small camp of tents with its own power supply. The nearest station is about 450 miles away, so any serious breakdown could mess with the whole project. For comparison, the space station is about 250 miles above Earth's surface. So this expedition had to be planned almost like a space mission. Granted, the ISS is still harder to reach, but you get the point. If the camp lost power, the researchers would have to fix it fast, within 1 or 2 days, or the hole could freeze shut completely. You might already know that ice can trap ancient microbes and particles from the air. Snow falls, freezes, and stacks up in layers. Each layer traps whatever was floating around at the time, stuff like dust or gases, even tiny organisms. That's how scientists read the past. Those stacked layers are called ice cores, but the researchers weren't after the ice. What scientists recovered there is a sediment core. Instead of frozen snow, it's a long tube of mud and rock drilled from the ocean floor under the ice. Think of it like this. Ice cores record what was in the air. Sediment cores record what was happening in the ocean. Everything floating in the water eventually sinks. When a massive ceiling of thick ice completely covers the ocean, the water below goes pitch black. Without sunlight, there's no way for plants to grow. The only stuff sinking to the seafloor is heavily crushed rock, physically scraped off the land by the moving ice above. When the climate warms, the ice pulls back and sunlight brings back life. The seafloor starts building the open water layer again. Over time, you get a repeating pattern. Gritty rock when it's iced over, pale shell-packed mud when it isn't. It's like Earth creating a barcode for scientists to find. When the drilling crew finally cracked open their giant tube of dirt, the mud was filled with marine fossils, the physical remains of ancient ocean bugs. And those specific bugs absolutely require sunlight to survive. Their entire food chain runs on big algae blooms at the ocean surface, so finding them is big proof that under warmer conditions, the ice pulled back completely. The total disappearance is the scary part about how West Antarctica behaves. The ice doesn't simply melt away inch by inch in a slow, predictable way. It has a built-in tipping point. Finding those deep-sea fossils suggests that once the ocean gets warm enough to lift the ice and release that rocky parking brake, the whole frozen raft can suffer a full system failure. It might basically vacate the premises, and that kind of collapse is what makes scientists nervous. Researchers call this one-way behavior hysteresis. This is Billy. He's sitting on a sled at the top of a snowy hill. The sled is pointed downhill, but Billy isn't moving yet because the snow is still holding him in place. Then someone gives the sled a tiny push. At first, it's just a slow creep. But once the runners start sliding, gravity takes over and the sled picks up speed on its own. The key part is that even if the person who pushed Billy instantly regrets it, the sled won't stop. Huge ice sheets can work the same way. Push the planet past a certain temperature line and the retreat can keep going on its own. Even if temperatures drop again centuries later, the melting doesn't automatically slam on the brakes. So scientists are trying to figure out how much warmer it has to get for West Antarctica to enter that locked-in mode. One estimate says the danger zone starts at about 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit above the global average temperature in the mid-1800s. They still can't say that's the exact flip point or give a clean countdown. That's what this core is meant to help confirm. But the ice isn't only getting hit from the outside by warmer water. Parts of Antarctica get heat from below too. Near the Ross Ice Shelf sits Ross Island, and on it, an active volcano. It's called Mount Erebus. It rises about 12,400 feet above sea level, and it's the southernmost active volcano on Earth. But the cool part is that inside its summit crater is a persistent lava lake, an actual glowing pool of molten rock that's been churning for decades. That's not normal. Only a handful of volcanoes on Earth maintain long-lived lava lakes. Erebus does it while surrounded by one of the coldest environments on the planet. Antarctica can be brutally cold at the surface, but Mount Erebus is powered by heat from deep inside the Earth. That heat doesn't care if the air above is negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Magma rises because it's hot and buoyant. As long as fresh magma keeps feeding the crater and gas keeps escaping, the lava lake can stay molten. Erebus also creates something you rarely see elsewhere: ice towers built by a volcano. Hot gases escape through cracks, hitting the freezing air and instantly solidify into tall, hollow chimneys of ice. Some of the caves inside those towers can be surprisingly warm compared to the outside air, creating strange little pockets where microbial life can survive in the dark. Another cool thing about this region is the miles of subglacial lakes. Some are the size of small cities. Pressure helps keep them liquid, and heat from below keeps them from freezing. A bunch of them connect through hidden channels, so they fill and drain like an underground plumbing system. Satellites can even catch the ice above rising and falling as the water moves. Erebus matters because it proves West Antarctica can get heat from below. That heat can melt the ice at the base and create water underneath. Those buried lakes matter because that water acts like lubrication. Less friction means the ice can slide faster. And when lakes fill and drain, that slippery layer can shift around suddenly. When grip and support both weaken at the same time, that sled doesn't need much of a push. There's no doomsday clock on the wall counting down to some dramatic end of the world. Even if West Antarctica starts sliding into the ocean, it wouldn't happen overnight. Coastlines would shift inch by inch, one storm at a time, with decades in between. Cities wouldn't vanish with a single wave. We'd have to do a lot of redesigning and moving. And centuries from now, if parts of today's coastline sit underwater, future divers might swim past the tops of skyscrapers the way we dive through ancient shipwrecks. Scientists punched through more than 1,600 feet of ice and finally solved the billion-year-old Antarctica's magnetic mystery. Their find also completely changes our understanding of how continents collided and merged around the same time. But first things first. Several decades ago, scientists were running geophysical surveys in Antarctica and noticed stripes of magnetic highs and lows, areas where the crust magnetizes differently than everything around it. Nobody could figure out the cause. Researchers started mapping those magnetic anomalies in the early 1960s. Back then, they used airborne magnetic surveys that flew lines across the ice to detect unusual magnetic signals. They linked those magnetic anomalies to volcanic rocks hidden beneath the ice sheet. By the mid-1990s, international scientists launched an entire project to map Antarctica's magnetic anomalies across the entire continent. They put together millions of miles of magnetic survey data from airborne lines, sea, and even observations from space, and managed to produce the first continent-wide magnetic anomaly maps by the end of the 1990s. Those maps show how Antarctica's crust formed and changed through time. So they knew what was going on there, but couldn't explain why it happened like that. To get answers, researchers from St. Petersburg State University teamed up with scientists around the world to study one of the hardest places to work on the planet. Antarctica sits smack on the coldest winds on Earth, with ice sheets of about 1.5 miles thick on average. And that ice doesn't just sit there. Over millions of years, it grinds rock, buries valleys, and hides everything beneath its fractured frozen blanket. To reach the ancient bedrock that held the magnetic mystery, researchers had to drill over 1,700 feet of ice before they could even pull up samples from the underlying crust. When they brought those rock samples back to the lab, they turned out to be pieces of ancient volcanic island arc. There were entire chains of volcanoes that formed above subduction zones, similar to the Aleutian Islands in Alaska or the island arcs near Japan. In the lab, scientists looked at chemistry, measured magnetic minerals under microscopes, and used radiometric dating. This method reads the decay of unstable atoms to figure out the age of an object. And all this helped them determine that these rocks had a completely different origin than typical Antarctic crust. The team found that this volcanic island arc didn't just drift nearby. It collided with East Antarctica when the supercontinent Rodinia was in the forming stage. Rodinia gathered nearly all of Earth's landmasses into one colossal formation, and when that volcanic arc crashed into East Antarctica, it welded into place like two tectonic puzzle pieces, locking together. That collision left behind a distinctive magnetic signature, one that satellites can still detect today. The way these rocks recorded magnetism makes perfect sense once you understand a little bit about magnetic minerals. When molten rock cools, iron-rich minerals like magnetite align themselves with Earth's magnetic field, pretty much like tiny compass needles freezing in place. Over geological time, these locked-in magnetic directions act like memory sticks. When scientists studied the Antarctic samples, they found magnetic directions that didn't line up with ancient Antarctica's old magnetic field, but did line up with where that volcanic arc would have been long ago. That magnetic memory showed that the rocks didn't grow in place, but traveled and slammed into Antarctica. Alongside magnetic clues, scientists also compared gravity measurements from satellites and ground surveys, and found even more evidence that the rocks beneath East Antarctica weren't ordinary. Some regions of Antarctica have slightly weaker or stronger gravity depending on the density of rocks buried beneath the ice. Denser rock, like ancient volcanic crust, produces a slightly stronger gravitational pull. If you picture lying on a mattress, the way it dips over a bowling ball differs from where there's only foam. That's how gravity variations tell scientists something unusual lurks below. Those gravity patterns matched where the weird magnetic rocks were coming from. It only backed up the idea of an exotic chunk of crust attached to Antarctica's edge. And these findings show us that Rodinia's formation wasn't tidy or orderly. Bits of crust from far-off places got plastered onto Antarctica's edge and became clues that waited a billion years for scientists to dig them up. Over time, heat, pressure, and tectonic forces buried and reshaped those rocks, but their magnetic fingerprints survived. Another Antarctic mystery scientists recently solved is the secret of Blood Falls. Yep, as the name suggests, it's blood-red water pouring out of a glacier, and no one could explain what gives it its color. Back in September 2018, a camera captured the falls suddenly coming alive. At almost the same moment, instruments sitting on top of the glacier recorded something odd. The ice surface actually dropped slightly. The glacier sank, the red water flowed, and then the ice slowly lifted back up again weeks later. So beneath all that heavy ice, there is salty water locked away for ages. The glacier presses down constantly, squeezing that hidden water harder and harder. When the pressure builds too much, the ice shifts, opens somewhere deep below, and the trapped liquid rushes out in a sudden pulse. Blood Falls acts like a pressure valve for the glacier. Salt turns the water into a thick brine that refuses to freeze, even in Antarctica's brutal cold. Over thousands, maybe millions of years, freezing concentrated the salt more and more. It left behind a liquid that can still move through solid ice. Scientists believe minerals from buried rocks feed that salty mix and give us clues about what lies far below the glacier. The red color makes the whole scene look dramatic, but the explanation for it is surprisingly simple. Underground, the water carries dissolved iron. The moment that liquid touches air, the iron reacts with oxygen and turns rust red, just like metal left out in the rain. Within minutes, bright crimson stains spread across the white ice. Cameras near the falls showed fresh red staining spreading day by day. At the same time, Temperature sensors deep in the lake where it flows recorded sudden cooling. Dense brine had slipped into the lake underwater and disturbed layers that normally stay perfectly stable. Even small disruptions matter here, since life survives in narrow zones where nutrients barely exist. As the drainage continued, scientists noticed the glacier slowed down too. With less water acting as lubrication underneath, the ice pressed harder against the rock below and moved forward more slowly. All this means that hidden water controls how fast entire glaciers slide across Antarctica. Some observations from the air also showed salty groundwater pathways stretching miles beneath the valley floor. The brine doesn't just sit under the glacier, but travels through rock and ice before finally escaping at Blood Falls. And deep inside that dark, oxygen-free water, there's life. Microbes live off iron and sulfur instead of oxygen and thrive in total darkness for millions of years. This ancient liquid may have stayed sealed beneath the ice long before humans even existed. Lake Enigma is another cool discovery from Antarctica with a twist. For a long time, researchers thought it was completely frozen solid. But during one expedition, they found that under the thick ice, there was a layer of liquid water about 40 feet deep. To learn more, they drilled through the ice and sent down a camera to explore what was hiding in the lake's depths. The lake's water, which they think comes from the nearby amorphous glacier, through a secret underground pathway, was filled with strange microbial life. These tiny microbes lived in mats that covered the lake bed. Some of the mats were thin and spiky, and others looked like crumpled carpets or even small tree-like shapes that grew up to 16 inches. Many of the microbes could make their own food through photosynthesis, just like plants do, and gave the lake a high amount of oxygen. One of the coolest discoveries was a type of microbe which usually lives in low-oxygen places. Lake Enigma might be similar to environments on icy moons like Europa or Enceladus. So it could mean that these moons also have hidden water under their ice and possibly microbial life too.
Ooh, mysterious mountain ranges hidden under thousands of tons of ice. Bizarre, transparent creatures with see-through skin, singing snow plains. Antarctica has its own terrifying secrets. And now, a mysterious ice hole the size of Switzerland that keeps popping open. And scientists have finally figured out why. This hole, called the Maud Rise Polynya, was first spotted in 1974 and 1976 in the Weddell Sea. Since then, it's been kind of playing hard to get. Sometimes it appears, sometimes it disappears for years. And when it does show up, it mysteriously changes size. For decades, researchers were trying to figure out what makes it form. Then, in 2016 and 2017, the Polynya went absolutely massive, more than 30,000 square miles. The hole stuck around for several weeks during winters. It was the first time since the 1970s that the Weddell Sea had such a huge, long-lasting Polynya. Here's the deal with Antarctic sea ice. In summer, the ice is at its smallest, around 1 million square miles. Yeah, that's considered small. By winter, it spreads to a whopping 7 million square miles, covering about 4% of Earth's surface in weird white tiles. Most of this ice grows during the weeks-long polar night on the floating ice shelves around the continent. These holes in the ice, called polynyas, usually form when strong winds from inland push the ice tiles apart. That same cold wind also freezes more seawater inside the hole, adding extra chunks to the ice sheet. But the Maud Rise Polynya isn't near the coast, where those winds normally help make holes. Out in the open ocean, holes like this are rare. Add in the fact that ice across the Southern Ocean has been shrinking. No wonder scientists are left bewildered. What exact conditions are creating this stubborn giant ice hole? To crack the mystery, the scientists dove into a mountain of data: satellites, floating sensors, even info from tagged marine animals. Plus, they had years of past observations from other researchers. And they found something unusual. In 2016 and 2017, the Weddell Sea's circular ocean current, called the Weddell Gyre, was stronger than usual. That extra punch made it easier for salty, warmer water from deep below to reach the surface. The Maud Rise Polynya sits above an underwater mountain called Maud Rise. During those big Polynya years, the stronger current caused salt to gather around this submerged peak. On the surface, the wind whipped over the ice, creating a corkscrew effect. It literally pulled that salty water up from below. The extra salt lowered the freezing point of the surface water, allowing the Maud Rise Polynya to form and stick around. Polynyas are really important for the planet. The dense salty water formed in these holes can travel huge distances, spreading across the global ocean and affecting climates everywhere. But these magnificent holes aren't the only cool and mysterious phenomena Antarctica is famous for. How about underground lakes? Or shall I say under-ice lakes? Because there are entire lakes hidden under Antarctica's thick ice. Scientists first found them back in 1970 using radar, and now they think there are around 400 lakes tucked under around 2 miles of ice in the explored areas. These lakes likely formed after Antarctica broke off from Gondwanaland, the ancient supercontinent. Surprisingly, the water in the lakes doesn't freeze because the ice above presses down too hard. Hey, it's physics, bro! The biggest of them all is Lake Vostok, discovered in the 1990s. It sits a bit more than 2 miles below the ice. Scientists have drilled down to take samples, and the water they pulled up was about 26 degrees Fahrenheit, even though the lake had been trapped under ice for over 20 million years. There's also Lake Williams. In 2014, scientists made a lit discovery there. They found a thriving colony of microorganisms nearly a mile under the ice. Those tiny creatures never saw sunlight or fresh air. Instead, they used methane and ammonium as energy to grow. Another marvel hides in plain sight in the McMurdo Dry Valley. It's a waterfall that looks like something straight out of a horror movie. Bright crimson water, like blood gushing from a wound in the ice, pours down 5 stories from Taylor Glacier into Lake Bonny. Ooh, spooky. But there's actually a scientific reason behind it. The water that feeds Blood Falls used to be part of a salty lake. Now, it's completely cut off from the atmosphere because glaciers formed on top of it. Trapped more than 1,300 feet underground, the water has become super salty, 3 times saltier than seawater, and it can't freeze. This underground water is also packed with iron and completely lacks oxygen in sunlight. When it slowly seeps through a crack in the glacier and hits the open air, the iron oxidizes, basically rusts, and turns the water that eerie dark red. With such creepy landscapes, Antarctica might look like a frozen wasteland, freezing cold, almost no rain, and winds that could knock you off your feet. The coldest Earth's temperatures ever was recorded there, minus 128.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And still, Antarctica is actually home to some seriously bizarre wildlife. For the longest time, scientists thought nothing could survive under all that ice. Turns out, they were very wrong. There are all sorts of creatures that have adapted to the brutal environment. Tiny microbes, crustaceans, colossal squid, and spiders so big their legs could cover a dinner plate. Giant worms with shiny golden bristles and huge sharp-toothed jaws also lurk under the ice. And then there's the ice fish, a completely see-through fish with huge eyes and organs you can literally see through its skin. These fish have built-in antifreeze proteins to survive the freezing waters, and they can't live anywhere warmer. Even stranger, they don't have hemoglobin, the protein that makes our blood red. In other words, they survive without the stuff that literally keeps most animals alive. But Antarctica wasn't always the frozen desert we know today. Millions of years ago, before the Ice Age, it was actually warm, lush, and full of life, maybe even home to ancient civilizations. Hard to imagine, huh? Scientists figured this out after finding fossilized wood, tropical tree remains, and leaf impressions, all pointing to the existence of rainforests. On top of that, they've uncovered fossils of marine animals, birds, and dinosaurs from the Cretaceous period. Even tiny creatures left their mark. Fossilized beetle wings from 14 to 20 million years ago, single-cell fossils, and, astonishingly, 50-million-year-old sperm cells preserved in the egg case of an extinct worm. So now, it probably won't shock you when I tell you that beneath Antarctica's thick ice sheets, there's a massive hidden mountain range. The Gamburtsi Mountains stretch for 745 miles and rise to almost 10,000 feet, about the third the height of Mount Everest. And all this is buried under between 6,500 to 13,100 feet of ice. The mountains were discovered in 1958. Scientists noted a thin patch of ice and some weird gravity readings while crossing the continent. Even though no one has ever seen those mountains directly, researchers use radar to map their shape and gravitational and magnetic readings to study them all the way to their base. Perhaps the craziest part is that the Gamburtsis are around 1 billion years old. So, in theory, they should have eroded away long ago. How they're still standing is a mystery. Most scientists think a frozen mantle beneath the ice might be protecting them from erosion, keeping this ancient range intact. And finally, Antarctica has its own soundtrack. The Ross Ice Shelf, the continent's largest ice shelf, is several hundred feet thick and spreads over 193,000 square miles, roughly the size of France. And scientists have recently discovered that this massive ice slab actually sings. The eerie melody comes from wind blowing over snow dunes, which creates vibrations in the ice and a nearly continuous seismic hum. You can't hear it with your ears, but seismic sensors pick up the mournful tune. In fact, it was discovered by accident. Scientists just installed special sensors to monitor other ice behaviors. Now, even cooler, the song changes depending on what's happening on the ice. Melting, storms, and shifting snow all tweak the vibrations. Researchers are now using this haunting melody as a kind of early warning system. They listen to it in real time to track the ice shelf stability and potential collapse. Ice piracy is like Pirates of the Caribbean, but you gotta swap those tropical seas for icy, freezing waters. And the captain here isn't Jack Sparrow, but a massive glacier in Antarctica. Meet the Polar Ice Glacier. Its calm, sparkling surface might look innocent, but don't be mistaken, it is a pirate, and a pretty skilled one too. Instead of gold, it's been stealing ice from its neighbors at record speed, and scientists can't believe what they're seeing. So, what exactly is ice piracy? Arr! This is a strange kind of glacier movement, where one glacier starts taking ice from another nearby. Instead of minding its own business and slowly sliding toward the sea, it suddenly changes course and begins pulling ice that used to belong to its neighbor. The pirate glacier speeds up, the victim slows down. The problem is that the balance of ice in the region might get completely thrown off. This isn't brand new information though. Scientists have known about this quirky behavior for quite a while. But they used to think that this process took hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. Now, something really strange is happening in Antarctica. We're seeing, for the first time ever, a glacier pirate in action, and it's moving much, much faster than anyone expected. It all started when researchers from the University of Leeds began looking at satellite images taken between 2005 and 2022. They wanted to analyze the rates of flow from 8 ice streams in West Antarctica. And yes, glaciers do move. Think of them as huge piles of snow that have turned into solid ice over time. This ice slowly changes shape, shifts, and moves. That's why glaciers are often called rivers of ice, because they flow, for real. Gravity is what makes it happen. The ice slowly slides and deforms under its own weight, thanks to the pull of gravity. And when it comes to glacial movements, they can either advance or retreat. If more snow and ice build up and melt away, break off, or evaporate, a glacier will advance. But if it loses more than it gains, it will retreat. Oh, and glaciers also move at different speeds, depending on things like the slope of the land beneath them. But if that flow starts speeding up, well, that's bad news for coastal communities all over the world, because that means more ice is moving from land into the ocean, which contributes to Antarctic ice loss and, eventually, sea level rise. Now, back to the recent ice research in Antarctica. The team calculated ice velocity using a tracking technique that measures how visible features, like cracks or rifts on the ice surface, shift over time. And they found that 7 of those 8 Antarctic glaciers had sped up. On average, they've doubled their speed since 2005. Given the impacts of how Antarctica's climate is changing, warming up more and more each year, this doesn't really come as a surprise. But here's something strange. One glacier, just one, slowed down. We're talking about the West Glacier. It slowed by about 10% over the study period. But how can a massive chunk of ice just hit the brakes, so to speak? To figure that out, researchers looked at its surroundings, and there it was, the culprit, the Polar East Glacier. Experts think Polar West slowed down because it's flowing toward its pirate neighbor, Captain Whitebeard, Polar East. That one's moving much faster. In fact, it's one of the fastest glaciers in the area. Its speed has been increasing by about 105 feet every year over the study period. Okay, that might sound slow, even for a tortoise. But for a glacier, that's disturbingly fast. Polar East is the Usain Bolt of ice chunks, and that's not even the most impressive part. The strange thing is that it changed its flow direction. Instead of moving straight ahead like it used to, it's now turning towards its neighbor, Polar West, and pulling ice from it. Scientists think this is happening because the ice at the point where the glacier meets the ocean is melting faster than before. That glacier melting makes the ice thinner, and as it thins, it changes the way the ice upstream flows. So now, instead of feeding both glaciers evenly, more of that ice is being funneled onto Polar East. In short, Polar East is speeding up and changing its course. So now it's pulling or stealing ice from its slower neighbor. And just like that, this mysterious glacier in Antarctica became a real ice pirate. Okay, this whole ice piracy thing isn't that weird. It's part of how glaciers normally behave. Slow, dramatic, and occasionally a little mischievous. What really blows scientists' minds is how fast it's happening. They used to think this was a super slow process, something that would take hundreds or even thousands of years. But this one is taking place in just 18 years. And this is a huge satellite discovery in Antarctica. Scientists were only able to spot it thanks to the Copernicus Sentinel-1 mission, a pair of European satellites that use radar to keep an eye on Earth's surface. They can track changes in ice, land, and ocean with incredible precision and coverage, making them perfect for studying how the polar regions are changing. Because here's the thing, keeping an eye on the coldest parts of our planet is becoming essential for our future. And this particular part of Antarctica, where both the Polar West and East glaciers are located, is thinning faster than anywhere else. Its glaciers are retreating at record speed. The grounding line, the point where the glacier stops resting on land and starts floating on the sea, is moving backward. When that happens, the ice sheet slides into the ocean even faster. But scientists say glaciers aren't just melting, they're reshaping themselves in completely new ways. And that's exactly what's happening with the Polar East Glacier. Seeing a pirate glacier in action firsthand has once again changed how scientists look at things. The new data on ice piracy shows something they've never seen before. Glaciers and floating ice shelves are interacting in new and surprising ways. So, more and more, experts need to rethink how these icy giants behave as the world warms up. And that's a big deal, because they play a significant role in how fast sea levels rise this century. In fact, Antarctica's glaciers are one of the biggest reasons our oceans are swelling. The continent is losing about 135 billion tons of ice every year. That's like dumping tens of billions of Olympic-sized pools of water into the ocean annually. If all of its ice melted, sea levels would rise by about 190 feet. That kind of rise would flood much of Florida and huge areas of the Netherlands and Bangladesh, for example. Many small island nations would completely vanish beneath the waves. Now, you might be asking yourself, what's hiding beneath all of Antarctica's ice? Well, it might look flat from above, but underneath that mile-thick layer of ice lies a whole landscape of steep mountains and deep valleys, crossed by winding rivers. Those hidden rivers could play a crucial role in how the ice sheet reacts to all this unusual warmth. Scientists now predict that as Antarctica's ice sheet keeps melting and thinning over the next few decades, those subglacial rivers will grow, overflow, and shift into new paths. This could make some of the biggest glaciers near the coast start to break apart faster, and that would make sea levels rise more quickly. So that's why understanding these changing dynamics and glacier movement, like our icy pirate, is so important. Every new discovery helps scientists figure out what's really driving Antarctica's glaciers and how they are responding to a warming world. The more we learn about these frozen giants, the better we can predict what might happen next, and how changes down in Antarctica could ripple across the entire planet.
See how the Antarctic Peninsula looks just like South America, but upside down? This isn't just a coincidence. It's the ghost of a 30-million-year-old breakup. These continents were once connected, but their divorce gave birth to an ocean current so powerful it was capable of completely freezing Antarctica and shaping its landscape. Here's how it went down. Tectonic plates pulled a sneaky move and cracked open a ridiculously narrow passage in the ocean, about only 500 miles wide, forcing 4.5 trillion cubic feet of water to flow inside this geological straw. This was the birth of an ocean current stronger than the Amazon River. This ocean current, called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, by the way, flows in a circular motion, going clockwise because of the strong winds that blow over there. This circular motion around Antarctica caused erosion, shaping the landmass of the continent into a circle, except for that stubborn peninsula, which is being slowly dragged east like a kid refusing to leave a playground. Wait, South America and Antarctica used to be one? Yep, a long time ago. South America, Australia, and Antarctica were all part of a supercontinent called Gondwana, which also included Africa at some point. Back then, South America and Antarctica used to be basically joined at the hip by a land bridge called the Antarctic Land Bridge, which just so happened to be a lush green forest and also a great dinosaur highway. Yeah, you heard it right. Dinosaurs. A 95-million-year-old dino, whose name I can't pronounce, sorry, was discovered in Australia, and scientists found out it had actually been a distant cousin of Argentina's Sarmientosaurus. Same jaw, same chiseled teeth, same everything. These guys were like identical twins, separated by an ocean. How? Because back then, Antarctica wasn't a frozen wasteland. It was a temperate rainforest, like Oregon, making it a pretty nice travel route for a dino family. But the land bridge wasn't just for dinosaurs. About 40 million years ago, the ancestors of Australia's marsupials waddled to the land down under all the way from South America, taking the Antarctica route, another proof that these continents used to be connected. Things remained somewhat peaceful for the dinos and the marsupials until Earth's ground started moving. This is what a German scientist called the continental drift theory, back in 1912. Our German friend here basically looked at the coast of South America and went, "Hey, this looks like it could fit into the coast of Africa." Like a scientific Sherlock Holmes, he noticed what others had overlooked for centuries. The continents were clearly pieces of a larger puzzle. And he was right. Here's the deal. Planet Earth is made of many layers of rocks and metals, like a cosmic onion. The outermost layer, the lithosphere, is divided into pretty solid tectonic plates that move atop a layer of softer, somewhat molten rocks, like slippery ice. This is why the plates move. In fact, they've been rearranging Earth's face for billions of years, with supercontinents forming and breaking apart in cycles, like a slow-motion game of bumper cars. This movement might be pretty slow since most tectonic plates only move 0 to 3.9 inches every year, except for the Nazca plate, racing ahead at 7.8 inches about as fast as your hair grows. But don't let their snail's pace fool you. These shifting slabs are the ultimate planet shapers. Their slow dance gives us everything from earthquakes that build mountains like the Himalayas, to rifts that birth oceans like the Atlantic. All because the oceanic crust is dense and sinks like a stone, while continental crust floats like a cork. It's this density difference that explains why continents exist at all. Without it, Earth would be completely covered by shallow seas. This slow-motion planetary renovation project is exactly what tore South America and Antarctica apart 30 million years ago. The plates under these continents started to drift apart in a process called crustal extension. It's like the lithosphere was pizza dough being slowly stretched until it thins and splits. As the crust stretched, it became thinner and weaker, eventually cracking like the surface of a drying lake bed. This whole thing gave birth to a new tectonic plate, the Scotia Plate, that emerged between South America and Antarctica, like a geological divorce lawyer. For a while, parts of this plate stayed above water as the last gasp of the Antarctic land bridge. It was Earth's version of that one thread still connecting your hoodie after the zipper breaks. These final connections might have persisted as chains of islands, but just like that fraying hoodie, the connection couldn't last forever. Eventually, this small but mighty plate became the final nail in the coffin of the land bridge connecting the two continents. Just like all the tectonic plates, this one was also on the move. As it expanded eastward, it opened a new passage of water called the Drake Passage, slowly covering the Antarctic land bridge with ocean water. The process was like pulling open elevator doors. At first, just a crack, then wider and wider until the connection was completely broken. This geographical divorce had chilling consequences. The new Drake Passage allowed the Antarctic circumpolar current to form, creating an endless loop of cold water that isolated Antarctica, shaped its land, and even cooled the entire planet. This current acts like a wall around Antarctica, blocking warm water and invasive species while regulating global climate. Eventually, Antarctica turned into an icebox that is 98% covered in ice sheets, and that holds about 61% of Earth's fresh water. Nowadays, this continent holds the title of the windiest, driest, and iciest place on Earth. It's a frozen desert where temperatures plunge below -128.6 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze your breath mid-air. A layer of ice there can be more than a mile thick, and it expands even further in winter to cover an area larger than the continental United States. Today, if you want to travel to Antarctica, the quickest sea route is through the Drake Passage, a 500-mile-wide body of water that is narrow enough for the winds to scream across thousands of miles, transforming into monstrous waves that can tower up to 49 feet, though calm days create waves only 13 to 16 feet high. Still twice as tall as Atlantic waves, mind you. This is probably why sailors call this stretch of ocean the Drake Shake. But tectonic movement isn't just about shifting continents. It's Earth's ultimate life support system. You see, about half of our planet's heat comes from radioactive decay in the core. Thanks, uranium-235. Something like nature's nuclear reactor. This heat is behind everything from volcanoes to the very plate motion that once connected Antarctica to South America. And it only comes out of the core because of tectonic movement. Without this internal heat engine, Earth would be just like Mars. When the plates move and release heat, they also release CO2 gases into the atmosphere, regulating the temperature of our planet. And when the plates move underwater, they take a lot of this CO2 back to Earth's interior, recycling all this gas. This is why the plates can change our air, climate, and even the evolution of life itself just by moving around. But billions of years ago, these plates were not moving around. Back then, it was like Earth was wearing a solid ceramic shell with many cracks. But even without tectonic movement, the heat managed to escape through these cracks in a process called stagnant lid tectonics, kickstarting all life on Earth. And no, tectonic movement is not a thing of the past. Earthquakes are the living proof that it is not just happening today, but might repeat again on a more dramatic scale in the future. You see, to form supercontinents like Pangaea, smaller megacontinents have to dive beneath another. And scientists predict that a similar process might create a new supercontinent called Pangaea Proxima in 250 million years. By then, humans might be extinct or living on Mars, but Earth's tectonic dance will continue, even without us. Not bad for something that moves more slowly than a traffic jam. Turns out, Antarctica and South America used to be BFFs before all that tectonic drama split them up, like a messy breakup that literally froze one of them out. Now, they just awkwardly mirror each other from across the Drake Passage. Classic exes. Welcome to one of the most mysterious and unexplored places on Earth. But what's so special about that? It's just some icy peaks and the endless snowy expanse of Antarctica. Yeah, that's right, but there's still a planetary scale mystery here. No matter how hard you try, you won't see a hidden mountain range, giant, unexplored land where no human has ever set foot, and it lies under another layer of mountains. It's like a nesting doll, but the size of a continent. These mountains hide Antarctica secrets, and these secrets can tell us something awesome about the ancient history of our planet. This gigantic unexplored territory in Antarctica is called the Gambritsev Subglacial Mountains. And the layer of ice above keeps this place untouched by nature and people. It's like a land inside another land, and it hides more than just mountains. There are valleys, hills, and plains. The whole area is similar to the European Alps, but unfortunately, we can't enjoy the view. Those mountains were first discovered in 1958 using seismological instruments. More than half a century has passed since then, and this place still remains one of the most poorly studied tectonic objects on Earth. Why? Because it's ice. A lot of ice. Who knows? Maybe there are some unknown ancient artifacts lying there. What if they're hiding a secret city or spaceships? It's unlikely, of course, but it would still be interesting to look there. Think about it. Hundreds or even thousands of miles of land that have remained unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. Even if no new species of animals or remains of an ancient civilization are there, this place still has a history. The history of the formation of continents on our planet. And scientists have already figured out some of this story. The mountains buried in Antarctica were originally like ordinary mountains, but as a result of a planetary scale event, they just… Wait a minute. Have you ever wondered how mountain ranges are formed? We see them in real life, in movies, in photos on the internet. We climb them. But how did they appear? Mountains have not always existed on the planet in this form. They appeared as a result of a large-scale collision of tectonic plates. Two giant solid chunks of ground are moving toward each other, then crash, and boom! Millions of tons of the Earth's crust pile on top of each other, mix, and form ledges and gorges. And all this can last for millions of years. Yes, it's a disaster, but it's very slow. Some tectonic plates are still colliding. For example, the Himalayas continue to grow because the Indian and Eurasian plates are still ramming into each other. And this process began about 50 million years ago. The Gambritsev Mountains under ice experienced a similar event, only much earlier. An article in the journal Earth and Planetary Science Letters says that they appeared during the formation of the supercontinent Gondwana. Two giant pieces of land were separated by a boundless ocean. But then, about 700 million years ago, they collided and formed Gondwana. This supercontinent included the territories of modern Africa, South America, Australia, India, and Antarctica. The giant pieces crashed into each other and released a stream of hot, partially molten rock. This mess grew bigger and bigger, forming mountains. The temperature of those mountains grew, their mass increased, and at some point, Gondwana became unstable. The supercontinent began to collapse under its own weight. The hot rocks below the surface began to flow sideways as a result of a process called gravitational spreading. Take toothpaste and start squeezing it out of the tube. Approximately the same thing happened with billions of tons of red-hot rock. Ancient mountains in Antarctica appeared right during this catastrophic event. You've just watched a visual simulation of global events that took place hundreds of millions of years ago. It looks cool, but how did scientists figure it out? How did they see this planetary-scale destruction? If the Gamburtsev Mountains under ice is one of the most unexplored places in the world, then how could people find out its origin? The answer is simple. Tiny particles of rock have told us about the changing landscape of the planet. These are zircons, but scientists also call them time capsules. This mineral is very handy and resistant to mechanical and chemical influences. It's difficult to crush, it doesn't get affected by erosion, and it doesn't dissolve in water. And there's uranium inside it. This chemical element shows scientists the age of the rock. The fact is that uranium always decays into lead at the same rate. Scientists look at the ratio of uranium and lead and determine the age of minerals with great accuracy. Okay, this sounds a bit complicated. Here's a simple example. Imagine that each mountain belt is a clock that starts ticking at the moment of its formation. That is, after the collision of tectonic plates. After the rock forms, uranium begins its slow decay. The more time passes, the more uranium turns into lead. The rate of this decay is always the same. This decay can last for billions of years. The less uranium is in zircons and the more lead, the older the rock is. And this is how it happens in practice. Geologists take several rock samples. In a lab, they crush it to extract crystalline zircons. Geologists then dissolve the particles in acid to separate uranium from lead. Then they use a special device, a mass spectrometer that accelerates atoms and sorts them by mass. This is a rather complicated process, but the bottom line is that this device shows scientists the amount of uranium and lead. They look at the ratios of these two elements and calculate the age of the rock. Geologists took zircons from sandstones near the Gamburtsev Mountains, studied those particles, looked at the level of uranium, and calculated the chronology of mountain formation. Then they compared the data obtained with the history of our planet and realized that the mountains buried in Antarctica appeared during the formation of the supercontinent Gondwana. But how did they find out that the supercontinent included Australia, India, and Africa? Zirconia from those Antarctic rocks turned out to be very similar to zirconium from those countries. That is, a long time ago, these three continents were together. So, the Gamburtsev Mountains began to grow about 650 million years ago. About 580 million years ago, they reached the height of the Himalayas, and 80 million years later, they experienced the melting of the Earth's crust. And while most of the mountain ranges on the planet were changing and collapsing, the Gamburtsev Mountains under ice remained untouched. Water, soil, wind, earthquakes, gravity, and other natural forces destroy mountain belts. This process is called erosion. But mountains buried in Antarctica haven't experienced anything like this. The cold temperature and the ice sheet around them kept this range unchanged. It's one of the best preserved ancient mountain belts on the planet. Okay, but why do we need to explore these mountains? What difference does it make that the supercontinent Gondwana collapsed in the past? It's possible that plants, frozen bodies of insects, or ancient bacteria have remained preserved under thick layers of ice. What about ancient animals? Many species could have lived on Gondwana. Studying ancient mountains in Antarctica can show us what the planet looked like about 500 million years ago. When Antarctica was a green continent, what lived on it? What happened to this life? Is it possible to revive those ancient creatures after so many years? If scientists were able to calculate the date of the supercontinent's appearance using tiny particles, then imagine what they could find after examining this hidden mountain range. It all sounds very interesting. But there's one problem. To take a small piece of this unknown world, you need to drill through a lot of ice. You need to deliver heavy equipment to one of the most inaccessible continents in the world, build stations, obtain an energy source, and conduct large-scale research. It sounds incredibly expensive, so this hidden territory will probably remain a mystery for a long time. Let's just hope that some billionaire will want to find out Antarctica's secrets and arrange a large-scale expedition there. These things can surprise you, they can scare you, they can also be very confusing to you. They're scattered all over the world, from the icy plains of Antarctica to the hot Nevada desert. But you don't have to leave your house to see these places. It's enough to open Google Earth or Google Maps and enter the coordinates to see many weird things captured by satellites. So, our first stop is in Antarctica. Here are the coordinates. At the moment, you can see almost nothing except a white snow cover. But some time ago, users discovered a strange ship in this place. It was lying there, turned on its side, covered with snow. What was it doing there, and where did it come from? The internet began to make up its own theories. It's part of a big rocket. It's a ship from outer space. It's a secret base. It got there from the Bermuda Triangle. The more time passed, the crazier the theories became. But the theory that turned out to be true was also the most unexpected. This ship was actually pareidolia. This term describes the human tendency to see patterns in randomness. Your brain sees familiar shapes in clouds or coffee grounds or rock patterns because of pareidolia. So this ship was most likely just a pile of snow or some kind of iceberg. In any case, you can't see it on maps now. Probably Google just didn't want people to inflate ridiculous rumors. Don't leave Antarctica yet, because our next mysterious place is nearby. Here are the coordinates. What does it look like? A giant door or a glass roof? It looks quite strange against the white blanket of snow. What's nearby? Japanese Showa Station. Are these two objects somehow related? Probably not. But what is it then? Someone online joked that it might be a door from a Boeing. Apparently, it'd have to be a huge Boeing. Someone said it was the entrance to a bunker or a secret base. Is it a portal to another dimension? Of course not. All these theories were discarded when scientists got involved. They said that this object was an ordinary iceberg that had run aground and got stuck. It's melting and reflecting the sunlight, which is why its surface looks so shiny. Nothing special. Let's move to another cold place. This is absolutely crazy. A huge broken face hidden in the snowy plains of Antarctica. Who is it? Some kind of villain? Or the head of a giant buried in the snow? It's obvious that it's just an unusual landscape, but it's still quite impressive. And by the way, this is another example of pareidolia. How do people even find such things? They're like, how about spending hours walking through Antarctica using Google Maps? Sounds like a great idea. Anyway, let's move to our next destination. Do you think this might be some kind of pattern for a scary ritual? Or is it a secret place for witches and warlocks? No, this is a scientific base called FACE, Free Air Carbon Dioxide Enrichment. They release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and run experiments to study its effects. What for? To simulate climate conditions and see how desert plants and ecosystems react to high carbon dioxide levels. Scientists monitor plant growth, soil chemistry, and the overall health of the environment in these regions. The thing is, the temperature is rising all over the planet. It's possible that in the future, many territories where people live will turn into a desert, and greenery in the deserts will be essential for our survival. So, scientists are looking ahead to know how plants will act in such conditions. Here are the coordinates of a place in another desert. You'll have to climb up a bit to see the whole picture. Giant stone wheels are scattered across the vast territory of the Jordan Desert. They're ancient, and scientists still don't know their true purpose. They were first discovered by pilots in the 1920s. In total, more than 1,000 wheels have been spotted there. Obviously, this is not a natural anomaly, and there's no pareidolia factor. But what is it? Scientists believe that ancient people placed those wheels at specific angles to the sun to tell time by the shadows and track the passing of years. Others suggest that the wheels were something like animal traps, or they could be places for ancient rituals. Now let's move from the hot deserts to the water. Enter these coordinates and wait. Why is the water in this lake red? Don't rush to draw terrible conclusions. The reason for this color is algae. Certain types of algae and bacteria live in this salt lake. They multiply and give the water this color. Sounds convincing, but I doubt anyone would actually want to swim in that lake. Our next spot is located in Australia. You can see trees grow on a small island, but wait. It's not an island. It's a ship. A real ship that has grown dense thickets of bushes and trees. This is the SS Airfield, also called the Floating Fortress. In 1972, this ship was retired. People were supposed to dispose of it, but something went wrong, and they just left the vessel in the water near the shore. No one needed it except nature. Over time, mangrove trees began to grow on the rusting vessel. The unwanted ship has become a local landmark. Many tourists take pictures of it and post them online, so you can easily find its images from a more beautiful angle. If you pick this location and turn on Street View mode, you will see beautiful houses in the city of Nancy, France. There's a road on one side, but on the other side, everything is blurred. Why is that? What is Google hiding? Online, you can find the photos of this street. They're not blurred. And in one of them, in the window, you can see a tall figure with glowing eyes. Users called this figure Ghost on the Balcony. Quickly, it became a local landmark. The internet was discussing the supernatural appearance of this phantom. Someone suggested that this was a visitor from another planet. The most plausible version is that it's a statue that was distorted because of the camera angle. But if it's just a statue, why did Google block out this house? Why didn't they want us to see this figure? People have put forward many theories about this. What do you think? Share in the comments. There's one more blurred place. It's located in Tokyo. Turn on Street View and check out the street, passers-by, and a few people who are completely blurred. What did Google hide this time? Fortunately, there are pictures on the internet. A few people with the heads of pigeons stay here. They were called pigeon people. Obviously, these aren't heads, they're bird masks, and there's clearly nothing paranormal here. It was just a joke from art school students. Pigeons in Japanese folklore are considered the symbols of luck and adaptability, so the students decided to wear them. They hardly expected to get on Google Maps. Our next point. There's nothing weird and mysterious here. This is the ghost town of Rhyolite, Nevada, where gold was discovered in 1905. Many came to mine the precious metal. In just a few years, electricity was installed, buildings went up, and by 1910, the town was abandoned. The gold was gone, the streets were empty, and the buildings were abandoned. More than 100 years have passed and the city has turned into ruins. Tourists come here to feel this atmosphere of abandonment and look at the unique houses built from glass bottles. But you can walk through the streets of Rhyolite using Google Maps and Street View mode.
So, there's a mysterious doorway in the middle of Antarctica. Some people think it's Bigfoot's vacation home, or a shuttlecraft from Star Trek, or maybe a door to Agartha, a mythical kingdom some people believe is located in the center of the Earth. Well, the scientists debunked all these poetic theories and explained that what looks like a mysterious doorway is located in an area of fast sea ice. It's offshore of the coast and is full of little islands with shallow water around them. When ice flows around hard rocks hidden underneath, it can create patterns that look odd but are totally normal. In this spot, the ice is thin, So the rocks underneath have a big effect on how the ice moves. The cold winds in Antarctica also shape the ice and snow and make it look like they're lines and shapes. So the mysterious doorway is just a rocky ridge poking out because the ice has melted a little. The top of the doorway is the tip of the rock, and the sides are snowy trails left by strong winds blowing in the same direction. It's essentially an iceberg that got stranded and is melting in one place. One YouTuber found another out-of-place mysterious object more than 150 miles off the shore of Antarctica, a 400-foot-long ice ship. The internet went wild with theories like that the ship must have ended up there right from the Bermuda Triangle. But there was no scientific proof that it was a ship and not just a large chunk of ice. And once some other internet users revisited the place, they noticed the ice melted in the summer and the hypothetical ship was gone. Another mysterious Google Maps find in Antarctica was a pyramid. And before you make up an exciting theory about how the ancient Egyptians built a secret base here, I have to tell you it turned out to be just a mountain. It's part of the tallest mountain range in Antarctica that stretches for almost 250 miles. It's not the first pyramid on this continent, as explorers from the British Antarctic Expedition found another unusually shaped mountain and nicknamed it the Pyramid. But this one didn't even have a pyramid shape. Here's one Antarctic find that definitely won't disappoint you: a giant ice shelf that reminded scientists of the Grand Canyon. A special submarine robot named RAN covered over 600 miles under the thick ice and brought back some amazing footage of icy mountains, valleys, flat plateaus, and swirly patterns made entirely of ice. One of the strangest things RAN found was giant bowl-shaped holes, or scoops, in the ice. Sadly, scientists lost track of the robot. They think that curious Wendell seals may have accidentally bumped into RAN and caused it to get stuck. To save energy, RAN probably shut itself down, and the scientists couldn't find it again. But the team is hoping to build a new robot and continue exploring this icy canyon to see how the patterns under the ice might change over the years. Another huge Antarctic canyon was found thanks to bad weather. A team of sound experts had to pause their work at the Casey Research Station in a storm. Instead of waiting around, they decided to use the unexpected free time to map the seafloor near Adams Glacier. And that's how they found a canyon that is almost 7,000 feet deep, almost 30,000 feet wide, and stretches over 28 miles away from the glacier. During the mapping, they discovered just part of the canyon before they had to go back to the research station. But when bad weather came in again, the ship went back and mapped more of the canyon. They were working in waves up to 13 feet high and super powerful winds, but they managed to get about 15 hours of data to complete their map. On the way back to Australia, they stopped one last time, and now they've got a full picture of the canyon. Studying it is helping scientists learn more about the history of glaciers and the interaction between the Antarctic ice sheet and the ocean. Now, there's a frozen lake in Antarctica called Lake Enigma. For a long time, people thought the lake was completely frozen solid. But during one expedition, researchers found that under the thick ice, there was a layer of liquid water about 40 feet deep. To learn more, they drilled through the ice and sent down a camera to explore what was hiding in the lake's depths. The lake's water, which they think comes from the nearby Amorphous Glacier through a secret underground pathway, was filled with strange microbial life. These tiny microbes lived in mats that covered the lake bed. Some of the mats were thin and spiky, and others looked like crumpled carpets, or even small tree-like shapes that grew up to 16 inches. Many of the microbes could make their own food through photosynthesis, just like plants do, and it gave the lake a high amount of oxygen. One of the coolest discoveries was a type of microbe which usually lives in low-oxygen places. Lake Enigma might be similar to environments on icy moons like Europa or Enceladus, so it could mean that these moons also have hidden water under their ice and possibly microbial life too. One more mind-boggling discovery from Antarctica is tiny pieces of amber in mudstone, found here for the very first time. It took scientists years of studying incredibly well-preserved fossilized roots, pollen and spores that they found back in 2017. Amber proves that resin-producing trees once grew in Antarctica, part of a lush rainforest that existed near the South Pole during the mid-Cretaceous period. Back then, disclaimer, I wasn't around then, the trees would have had to survive through months of darkness during the long Antarctic winters. Scientists believe they adapted by going dormant for a long time. The amber pieces the scientists found are tiny, but they are beautiful shades of yellow and orange with bumpy surfaces that show how the resin flowed out of the trees. This resin likely leaked out to protect the trees from insects. It was preserved because water quickly covered it and kept it safe from sunlight and air. A scientist was browsing through satellite images for brown trails of penguin waste and found 4 new colonies of emperor penguins at the base of the globe. These new colonies likely have been around for years, though 3 of them are rather small, with fewer than 1,000 breeding penguins each. One of the new colonies was found close to a place called the Lazarev Ice Shelf, where there used to be a larger penguin colony. They thought this colony went extinct in 2019, but it seems the penguins have just moved a bit because of changing sea ice conditions. So studying them can help us learn more about how emperor penguins adapt to changes in the environment. Now, there used to be a giant river system in Antarctica 40 million years ago. Researchers found proof of it after studying soft sediments and hard rocks from the frozen seabed. They looked at tiny bits of radioactive elements, like uranium and lead, and learned that the deeper dirt came from the time of dinosaurs. The dirt closer to the surface was younger and had an interesting pattern, like the kind you see in river deltas today, such as in the Mississippi River or Rio Grande. Scientists found tiny signs of life in the sand. The river that once flowed here started in the Trans-Antarctic Mountains and traveled 930 miles before it reached the sea. Researchers kept studying newer layers of dirt from about 20 million years ago. They hope this will help them predict what the Earth's weather patterns might be like in the future. Ooh, you're diving into the dark and icy waters of Antarctica. The airy blue darkness is enveloping you, reminiscent of the vast expanse of open space. In these depths, where you least expect to encounter any living creature, you suddenly hear a loud, strange sound. A quacking noise, as if a giant duck was hidden in the deep. In 1960, researchers first recorded this sound and named it bioduck. Clever. For decades, they tried to unravel the mystery of its source. Was it a giant kraken? An extraterrestrial spaceship that had crashed into the ocean? A mysterious sea monster? Or perhaps an enormous duck? There were many versions, one more bizarre than the other. Oceanographers detected similar sounds in other locations as well. Off the western coast of Australia and near New Zealand, they recorded similar but higher-pitched signals, which they named bio-goose. It seems the creepy atmosphere of the story disappears with such names. Anyways, these sounds were not isolated incidents. They happened multiple times with consistent intervals. Many initially thought the source must be mechanical, given the regularity of the sounds. However, studying the oceans in the latter half of the 20th century was challenging because of limited technologies. Nevertheless, scientists persisted in collecting data on bioduck and biogoose, driven by their insatiable curiosity. As more data accumulated, so did the theories. But scientists eventually uncovered the mystery. Bioduck turned out to be a form of communication with a biological origin. When researchers analyzed the repeating sounds, they noticed that the signals never overlapped. One source would speak while the others remained silent, suggesting a form of communication. The question remained, which ocean creature possessed such an extraordinary method of communicating through varied frequency sounds? The answer, as many have guessed, is whales. Scientists compared the bioduck sound from Antarctica with the calls of minke whales and found striking similarities. The biogoose sounds from the waters off Australia and New Zealand likely belong to other species or very young minke whales. This discovery, however, only deepened the mystery. What purpose did these sounds serve? Were the whales discussing their dinner plans, laughing at the humans recording their voices, or perhaps sharing deep insights about the universe? The possibilities were endless, but the most astonishing revelation was that humans might one day learn to communicate with these magnificent creatures. Communicating with whales is no longer a far-fetched idea. Scientists from the University of California have already established contact with a humpback whale named Twain. In a groundbreaking experiment, researchers conducted a 20-minute conversation with the marine mammal. Here's how they did it. The specialists went on a marine expedition to the coast of Alaska, where they recorded the sounds of a group of humpback whales. Then they played these sounds through speakers, sending the signals back into the ocean. The recorded sounds resembled a greeting, like, "Hey, what's up?" but in the whale language. These greetings are used by whales to call each other or indicate their location. Now, soon after sending the signals, the researchers received a response. Twain approached the boat, circled it, and replied with a "hey" of its own. This marked the beginning of the first ever human-whale conversation. For 20 minutes, the scientists sent 36 signals to Twain, and each time the whale responded. Moreover, it waited for time intervals before answering. That is, the team received a response from the whale, waited 10 seconds, and turned on the sound again. Researchers then waited 10 seconds and answered. It seems that Twain was a very delicate interlocutor. Maybe it was a gentleman in the whale world, who knows? Or maybe it was simply intrigued by the unusual interaction. The signals used in this communication belonged to a group of whales that included Twain. It's likely that the researchers had recorded Twain's own sounds and used them to communicate with it. In a sense, Twain was conversing with itself. Now let's continue our journey and venture into the deepest oceanic trench on Earth, the Mariana Trench. A quick reminder, the Mariana Trench is a colossal chasm in the ocean floor, stretching over 1,500 miles south of Japan and reaching a depth of nearly 36,000 feet at its deepest point. To put that into perspective, the height of the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, is like 1/10 of the Mariana Trench's depth. Now imagine this. In this deep, dark abyss, scientists recorded a strange sound. Unlike bioduck, this sound resembled something from a science fiction movie, a low rumble, followed by a metallic ping, reminiscent of the sounds made by spaceships in sci-fi movies. Researchers named this mysterious phenomenon biotwang noises. Scientists first detected this strange sound in 2014 during an acoustic survey of the Mariana Trench, and they quickly identified its source: whales, specifically Bride's whales. Using artificial intelligence, researchers analyzed around 200,000 hours of audio recordings from the ocean and found matches with a group of Bride's whales. Like other animals, these whales use sounds as a form of communication. Now, did you know what else was found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench? A plastic bottle. It's unlikely it was done by a kraken or a whale or some type of monster. Everything is simpler here. The bottle ended up there because of a human. But that's a topic for another video. Okay, let's deal with one more sound. No whales this time, just a mysterious sound in the loneliest place on Earth. This place is called Point Nemo, and that's why it's so lonely. Located in the South Pacific Ocean, Point Nemo is the most remote spot from any land. The nearest island is 1,450 nautical miles away. It's about the same long distance from land in all other directions. Moreover, here, there's almost no marine life, since few water currents reach this spot, and therefore few nutrients are supplied. In a sense, it's a water desert. And so, in 1997, oceanographers recorded a very strange and frightening sound coming from the depths in the area of Point Nemo. It was something gigantic and scary. People called it the bloop. As soon as journalists found out about this phenomenon, people around the world began to invent the most fantastic versions. The most popular of them was that the sound's source was a giant sea monster, kraken, or some other creature. The hype around the bloop didn't last very long. Scientists managed to find out the nature of the mysterious noise. It turned out it belonged to an iceberg. When they crack and collapse, they create powerful ultra-low frequency sounds that can be heard from a very long distance. To confirm this version, scientists recorded the sounds of other icebergs and heard something similar to the bloop. Oh, by the way, Point Nemo is so lonely that space agencies drop out-of-service satellites here. Space objects just fall in the water. There's a 99% chance that no animal or human will be harmed by falling debris in this lonely place. That's why many people call it the satellite cemetery. But what if, someday, a spaceship from another planet falls here? What if it has already fallen in Point Nemo and sometimes emits an emergency signal that breaks through the ocean? Ooh. All the mysteries you have heard have already been solved. How about we end this video with a mystery that still baffles scientists? Meet upsweep. One of the most mysterious sounds ever recorded in the ocean. It's not just noise, it's a series of short ascending tones repeated at intervals of several seconds. It was first discovered in 1991 using hydrophones installed in the Pacific Ocean. At first, oceanographers suggested that upsweep could be associated with volcanic activity or underwater earthquakes. But the seasonal nature of the sound and its intensity change depending on the time of year, which rules out these versions. People began to consider hypotheses related to the biological life of the ocean. They studied the migration routes of marine animals and their behavior at different times of the year. However, despite all efforts, the sound source has not been identified. Some studies suggest that upsweep may be associated with certain species of fish or other marine animals that make sounds for communication or navigation, but no one has been able to prove it.
Look at those lush coniferous forests and tundra. What a wonderland! You may have mistakenly thought it's Canada, but it's not. It's Antarctica, about 34 million years ago. So what makes Antarctica this frigid today? It turns out a mix of dropping carbon dioxide levels and some tectonic shuffle played a huge role in transforming this ice-free paradise into the frozen continent we know now. About 50 million years ago, CO2 concentrations were sky-high, strutting around at around 1,000 to 2,000 parts per million. But as those levels tumbled down, global temps started to drop, paving the way for the mighty ice sheets that later took over Antarctica. While the CO2 dive was happening, tectonic activity was also working its magic. The big split between South America and Antarctica opened up the Drake Passage, which created the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. This powerful current acted like a bouncer, keeping warm air and ocean currents from crashing the Antarctic party, and helping keep things rather frosty. If you mix up Australia and Antarctica, you're not that wrong. These two continents used to be one. If you mix up Austria and Australia, it's much worse. By the way, don't fall for the internet myths and memes. There's no help desk in Austria specifically for people who intended to fly to Australia. Now, look at this magnificent Australian pink beach. It's precious, and not in a figurative sense. Those mysterious pinkish sands are actually garnet, and it's widely used in jewelry. Geologists studied those sands and came to the conclusion that the garnet contained there is older than local mountains. That doesn't make sense, right? In fact, it does. You see, Australia didn't used to be this very detached continent as it is now. Many, many millions of years ago, Australia and Antarctica were part of the supercontinent Gondwana, and glacial erosion released the garnet, which eventually made its way to the beach. These sands formed when South Australia was flat and chill, long before the mountains appeared. Most garnet gets washed away, but this batch has a rich history, tracing back to glacial rocks in the Transantarctic Mountains. So this pink sand comes from an ancient mountain range hidden under Antarctic ice. Not only does Antarctica ice hide gems like garnet, if you look harder, you might find entire buildings. Sounds insane, but this is exactly what a British explorer did. His name is Chris Brown, and he uncovered an entire building beneath the ice. He was traveling to the pole of inaccessibility, and it all started with a bummer. Chris and his son had their plane broken. Suddenly, they spotted a lone bust peeking out of the snow. This place was an old meteorological station. Despite freezing conditions, Chris and his son Micah had a blast exploring. Chris is on a mission to conquer all 7 earthbound poles of inaccessibility and has tackled 5 so far. I guess you already know that Antarctica is the largest desert on Earth, much larger than the Sahara or the Gobi. Still, despite being the driest continent on Earth, it boasts a seriously weird waterfall. Nestled in the mesmerizing McMurdo Dry Valleys, it's 5 stories tall and looks like it's gushing blood. It's even called Blood Falls. It may look outlandish and even frightening, but its nature can be easily explained. The water that creates this crimson cascade was once a salty lake, but over time, it became sealed off from the outside world when glaciers formed on top of it. Now, this ancient water hanging out 1,300 feet below the surface has cranked up its salt levels to 3 times saltier than the ocean. This salt water is also loaded with iron and gets 0 oxygen or sunlight. When the iron-rich water trickles through a crack in the glacier and meets the air, it rusts up, turning dark red. You may have mistakenly heard that no bug species belongs to Antarctica, but it's not exactly true, because there's this tiny Antarctic midge living there. Plus, there are some spiders too. Those aren't your average spiders hanging out in the darkest corners of your apartment. Those are critters lurking in the chilly darkness of the Antarctic ocean floor. These little marine creepers are actually arthropods and can stretch around 20 inches across. As if that wasn't bizarre enough, they also breathe through little holes in their legs. Quick question. What's the color that you associate most with Antarctica? I'm sure it's white. That's my association too. However, Antarctica may look like a slice of watermelon. That colorful snow comes courtesy of a tough little algae called Chlamydomonas nivalis. When things start to warm up during the Antarctic summer, these little guys release their vibrant red and green spores, painting the snow in wild and funky colors. But it's best to steer clear because that snow is not just a pretty sight. It's also toxic and definitely not edible. Searching for fossils is always a blast, but when you're in one of the most remote spots on the planet, it gets even more exciting. A diverse team of scientists recently hit the mother lode, pulling in over a ton of fossils from ancient marine life, dinosaurs, and birds from the late Cretaceous period, about 71 million years ago. Their adventure kicked off with a flight to South America, followed by a 5-day trek through the infamous Drake Passage. Upon reaching Antarctica, they set up camp using helicopters and inflatable boats. You might be thinking, why dig in Antarctica with all that ice? Well, it turns out there are places where rocks pop up, depending on the season. The team went to James Ross Island, located in the Antarctic Peninsula, and they went there during February and March. And that's one of the few parts of Antarctica where in summer, rocks are exposed, and those rocks can come from the age of dinosaurs. The expedition was a success, as they discovered over a ton of remarkable finds. Next up, the fossils will head to Chile before making their way to Pittsburgh's Carnegie Museum of Natural History. Among their discoveries, they found relics dating back about 71 million years, alongside some around 67 million years old, including plenty of snails, clams, and various marine creatures. Yikes! Look at this creepy sea worm. It could live in LA and be a star in a horror movie, but it chooses to call the chilly waters of the Southern Ocean near Antarctica its home. These worms can grow up to 8 inches long and 4 inches wide, but don't let their spooky exterior trick you. Research suggests they might actually be superheroes in disguise, playing a vital role in keeping ecosystems buzzing. Now, see that head? It's not really a head, It's just a retractable throat that helps this toothy creature chow down on its meals. Antarctica has many creepy critters to offer. Let me introduce you to the Antarctic strawberry feather star. It's not like Patrick from SpongeBob, though. It's more like a deep-sea creature straight out of a horror movie. Picture this: 20 wiggly arms, some stretching up to 8 inches, all decked out with these bizarre little bumps. Yikes indeed. Back in 2014, scientists buried 34 seismic monitors in the snow on the Ross Ice Shelf, which is huge. Think of it as an ice slab the size of Texas, just chilling over the Southern Ocean. These clever little machines picked up a nearly non-stop buzzing. Even though our human ears usually can't catch these low-frequency sounds, scientists have worked their magic and made them audible for us. They even shared the creepy audio online. A glaciologist from the University of Chicago says that if you could hear this vibration, it'd sound like a swarm of cicadas taking over the backyard in late summer. But these glacier explorers weren't trying to capture spooky tunes. They're actually on a mission to monitor the Ross Ice Shelf because things are heating up, literally, and the ice is melting faster than ice cream on a hot day. Ice shelves are like Earth's safety plugs, keeping all that massive ice from surging into the ocean. So what exactly is making all that noise? It's likely just strong winds whipping across ice dunes, creating a kind of natural vibration. The Loch Ness Monster is actually not from Scotland. Turns out, this real-life creature lived in the freezing waters of Antarctica about 70 million years ago. In 2019, researchers discovered fossils of a huge, prehistoric marine reptile that looked a lot like what people described as Nessie. This beast was terrifying, measuring up to 36 feet long with a massive giraffe-like neck. It also weighed around 15 tons, which is about the size of 3 elephants. Next up on our list of huge animals is a penguin. I know penguins aren't exactly what you'd call big, but scientists have just found what they think might be the biggest penguin ever. The Kumimamu fordici. It's believed that these giant birds were hanging around New Zealand about 55 million years ago, and they were huge, weighing over 330 pounds. That's about 5 times the size of the emperor penguins, which are considered the largest penguins alive today. Now, let's move on from massive creatures to something much smaller. Meet B. manfredschmidti, a great ape that lived around 12 million years ago in what is now Germany. This creature is very special, as it's the tiniest great ape ever discovered. And when I say tiny, I really mean it. These ancient animals only weighed about 22 pounds. They were basically no bigger than a super chunky cat. If you think small creatures aren't scary, wait until you meet the electric blue tarantula. This newly discovered species from Thailand's mangroves has an almost otherworldly electric blue color. Its vibrant hue doesn't come from pigment, it is actually caused by the unique structure of its hair, which reflects blue light, making it look like an extraterrestrial being. We're going even further now, diving into the freezing pitch-black depths. At around 2,000 feet deep in the Andaman Sea, scientists found a new species of ghost shark, which they named Chimera supape. Their appearance is straight out of a horror movie. They have sleek, pale bodies, frills that look like feathers, and large, creepy eyes. These ghost sharks aren't actually sharks, but they are related, having diverged from their cousins about 400 million years ago. The good news is they're not too scary since they're only a bit bigger than a shoebox. Just when you think we can't find stranger creatures, we come across this ancient amphibian from Brazil. Scientifically known as K. rosei. This newly discovered giant crocodile-like creature lived during the Triassic period, over 240 million years ago. At nearly 10 feet long, it had a powerful jaw, resembling the modern-day alligator. This beast was definitely a survivor since it adapted to the most severe conditions ever seen on the planet. Last year, scientists were tracking the dense Amazon rainforest at night when they found some quirky orange spiders that looked like they were wearing black boots. The team soon discovered it was a new type of giant crab spider. And no, they don't look like crabs at all. They only got their name because, while perched on plants, these spiders spread their legs out to the sides, just like crabs. Do you know that some new species are named after celebrities? Hollywood icon Harrison Ford now has his very own snake, for example. Discovered in Peru, T. Harrison 40 honors the actor famous for his role as Indiana Jones, an archaeologist with a notorious fear of snakes. Unlike the film's menacing serpents, this new snake species is quite modest in size, measuring about 16 inches long. We also have the Rampholion princei, a small new species of pygmy chameleon from Tanzania that was named after US rapper and poet Prince Iya. He received this honor because of his work raising awareness about global environmental issues. Another celebrity namesake is DiCaprio's snail-eating snake, which hangs out in the shrubs of Panama's forests. This S. Irmelindi caprioi is about 15 inches long and spends its nights on palm fronds looking for snails and slugs. Its round eyes look like glowing coals that can be a bit scary, but overall, the creature is super chill. Even when it feels threatened, it doesn't bite. It just coils up around its head and gives off a really bad smell. Now something a bit more sinister. Meet Venomius tomhardii. Does that name ring a bell? Exactly. This new species of spider was named after Tom Hardy's portrayal of the infamous Marvel character Venom. And all because the black spots on the spider's abdomen reminded researchers of the famous anti-hero. Most spiders of this species were found in Australia at night, sitting in their elaborate webs in forested areas near the coast. When disturbed, these creepy crawlers often hide in silk-lined hollows in tree branches. We've also got something for the Lord of the Rings fans. In the vast and warm waters of the Amazon River, scientists have just discovered a new species of pacu. This fish is a relative of the terrifying piranha, with a plant-based diet and human-like teeth. It was named Myloplus sauron because of a bold vertical black mark on its side, which reminded researchers of the fiery eye symbol of the villain Sauron from Tolkien's epic saga. Wait, is that a tanned capybara or a wild dog? Well, actually, it's neither. This is a newly discovered dwarf deer. This tiny creature, about the size of a basset hound, scurries through the forests of Peru. The combo of large eyes, stocky body, and short legs makes this animal simply adorable. This cute little deer is the complete opposite of what we've got coming up next. This bizarre-looking creature is what we believe the beast of 5 teeth might have looked like. Its fossils, found in Chilean Patagonia, showed that it lived during the age of dinosaurs, about 72 million years ago. This finding is just another piece of evidence that mammals had been roaming around that part of South America much earlier than we thought. Moving from the forests of South America to the deserts of Australia, we come across a sand dragon lizard, known scientifically as Tenephorus tayacalpa. With its sandy color and long, lean body, this lizard looks like it could star in a Dune movie. Discovered last year, this sand dragon lizard blends in perfectly with the hot sands of the Great Victoria Desert in southern Australia. For over 10 years, a large-eyed creature managed to hide from scientists who ventured into the mountains of southwestern China. But not this time. In 2023, the group finally managed to take photos of 7 frogs that didn't match any known species. They're now known as Leishan odorous frogs, a species that grows to be about 2 inches long and has small bumps all over their grass-green bodies. Off the coast of Chile, we have recently found a seamount nearly 4 times as high as the Burj Khalifa. Underwater mountains are usually home to beautiful life forms, like sponge gardens and ancient corals. But this Chilean seamount also hid a creature known as the flying spaghetti monster. It's a rare type of squid with long noodle-like tentacles that make it look like an underwater pasta dish. Including its tentacles, this strange creature can be over 130 feet long. Recently, scientists were diving into the cold waters of the Antarctic Peninsula when they thought they had found an ordinary dragonfish swimming by. But there was something unusual about this one. It turned out that this fish had 2 darker vertical stripes along its slender body. That's when they realized they were looking at a new species, the banded dragonfish. From bizarre sea creatures to a cute one. In 2017, locals were diving near Kume Island in Japan when they found the skeleton panda sea squirt. This deep-sea oddity quickly won people over with its look because its black spots actually resemble a panda bear's eyes and ears. At least if you have a good imagination. This unusual creature filters water to catch its food, and is yet another reminder of the ocean's hidden wonders. The South Pole is more than penguins and endless snow. There's a hidden ghost world within it. Look, it's right here on the globe. Don't confuse Antarctica with the Arctic, which is at the top of our maps. Much smaller in size, and, let's face it, way less mysterious. The ice sheet covering Antarctica is about 1 to 3 miles thick, which is up to 16 Eiffel Towers stacked on each other. This massive blanket hides the true features and contours of Antarctica's land. We still don't know much about this mysterious continent, and it is ice and snow that are to blame. We still don't even know the true shape and size of this continent. Mapping Antarctica without some huge shovels is an incredibly hard task. But satellites learned to penetrate the ice with their cameras. And now we know there's actually an enormous, dramatic ancient landscape beneath the snow. The ghost of the past. About 90 million years ago, Antarctica was a much warmer place. It was actually a lush rainforest with tons of plants and probably teeming with life. It even had rivers flowing through it. Then the ice came. This happened about 34 million years ago, during the transition from the Eocene to the Oligocene, when our planet cooled significantly. It was the beginning of one of our several ice ages. The land remained, but now was hidden under ice and snow that got thicker and thicker. To a regular eye, Antarctica turned into a white desert, vast, flat, and featureless. Time went on. This massive ice sheet moved around, smoothing and shifting the ground beneath it. Over the millions of years, it changed what the land looked like. Now, if we looked under the ice, it wouldn't hold any signs of the original South Pole, except for one place. In areas where the ice is especially thick and doesn't move much, like in East Antarctica, it has actually worked the other way around. It became like a super thick blanket that protects the land. Normally, things like wind or rain slowly wear away the ground over time, changing its shape. But since we have this protective ice blanket, it prevents these natural processes from reaching the stuff underneath. So, the ground stayed almost the same for millions of years, like it's been frozen in time. This special area near the Aurora and Schmidt subglacial basins has become the ghost of Antarctica's landscape. This place was barely touched even since it was first covered in snow 34 million years ago. This is a historical footprint, a place that can tell us what Antarctica's ground looked like before it became a freezing nightmare. As scientists peered under East Antarctica, they saw an amazing ghost. The traces of the rivers that were flowing there millions of years ago, various valleys, and some weird little islands, as well as 3 big chunks of land shaped like the letter U. Hey, what's that all about? You see, the continents on our planet are moving constantly, sliding along the red-hot lava mantle like cereal on milk. Over history, they came together and broke apart several times. Hundreds of millions of years ago, several continents were a part of one enormous Gondwana. Antarctica was one of them. It used to be one huge landmass. But when Gondwana broke apart, the poor continent got stretched by tectonic forces. Parts of land were pulled away from each other. Whoosh! And they got torn apart. And that's how we got these big chunks or blocks of land under thick layers of ice. In any case, scientists now want to explore this ghost a bit more. But to study it deeply, they need to actually drill down through the ice, like using a straw to get to the bottom of a thick shake. This will help them pick up some rocks and dirt from way below to learn more about the Earth's history and climate. Antarctica is the 5th largest continent in the world, approximately bigger than the entirety of Europe or Australia, competing with the entire South America in size. Aside from East Antarctica, we discussed there are several more regions: Antarctica Peninsula, South Pole, West Antarctica, and the Ross Sea. The continent is basically a frozen sandbox, and all its hidden, mysterious landscape is actually less explored than Mars's terrain. We only know for sure that without ice, it wouldn't just be flat and empty, but an entire world full of big mountains, huge canyons, and even fiery volcanoes. Some of these volcanoes are so huge that they peak above the layers of snow. In West Antarctica alone, there are at least 138 volcanoes, though only about 8 or 9 are active today. One of the craziest ones is Mount Erebus, the southernmost volcano and the tallest one on the continent, about 12,500 feet high. And deep beneath the ice sheet, this guy hosts incredible, beautiful subvolcanic caves. The temperatures there are warm enough for t-shirts. The Antarctic Peninsula, or Lesser Antarctica, looks like a bunch of mountainous islands deeply underground. It has newer volcanic rocks that are part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is like a giant circle of volcanoes and earthquake zones around the Pacific Ocean. The Greater Antarctica is a huge part, almost as big as Australia. It consists of East Antarctica and the South Pole. Beneath the ice, it's a place of rocks that have been around for a very, very long time, including the special zone we mentioned. You probably know that Antarctica is nearly devoid of humans. No wonder, with a mean temperature of about -46 degrees Fahrenheit. But even though this place is horrifyingly cold and deserted, life still clings on. You guessed it, in the underworld. In 2017, scientists found DNA traces of algae, moss, and even possibly unknown small animals in the deep caves. That means that even in such crazy conditions, there are still unique ecosystems thriving in little isolated warm pockets beneath the snow. There was another incredible find beneath Antarctica's Ross Ice Shelf, a lively ecosystem vibing within an underground river. Scientists have long suspected that Antarctica's underworld should have some freshwater lakes and rivers. One day, a satellite spotted a groove there. They decided to explore it and used a hot water drill to melt their way through the ice. As they reached the underworld, they dropped a camera into one of those hidden fresh rivers. And at first, they thought they'd find just some rocks or something. But instead, they stumbled upon hundreds of amphipods, tiny shrimp-like creatures. Little ones instantly swarmed around the lens. Shrimps blocked the camera and scientists couldn't check out what they wanted to. Pretty funny, but at least that means that there really is an important ecosystem deep within Antarctica. Now, they're gonna explore it. And all this is just the beginning of the mysterious underworld. Antarctica's snow also hides the deepest canyon on Earth under the Denman Glacier. Well, Mariana Trench is still the deepest point on Earth, but it's a part of the oceanic crust, geologically speaking. Also, in 1958, explorers found a huge mountain range under the ice, as big and tall as the famous Alps Mountains. The range stretched for about 745 miles with peaks as high as 1.7 miles. And all this magnificence is buried under tons of ice. Who knows what else we might find there? Antarctica holds about 60% of our entire planet's freshwater, which means it would be pretty bad if it melted. For example, there's this Doomsday Glacier, officially known as Thwaites Glacier. It's a huge ice formation, about the size of Florida, and it's melting right now. Every year, the sea levels rise by 4% because of it. If this guy melts away completely, the sea levels all around the world will increase by 2 feet, which might not sound like a lot, but it would be catastrophic for coastal areas. Luckily, researchers have found that even if its ice shelf were to collapse in the next 50 years, the glacier itself wouldn't retreat as quickly as they feared. It's still losing ice rapidly, but it would be quite a slow process.
We've all dreamed of visiting the Arctic and witnessing the natural wonders of polar bears frolicking on ice floes, or the aurora borealis dancing across the sky. Well, sorry to break it to you, but you won't find any tourists flocking to Antarctica anytime soon. Why, you may ask? Let's dive into it. First off, where is Antarctica? It's located in the southern hemisphere, specifically at the South Pole. The Southern Ocean surrounds it, and most of the continent is covered by ice, making it one of the most remote and frigid places on Earth. Now, have you ever met someone who's visited Antarctica? Probably not. It's one of the least visited places on the planet, and only a handful of lucky explorers have seen its interior, which is mostly made up of glaciers and ice fields. But trust me when I say the wildlife and scenery are out of this world. Why shouldn't you travel to Antarctica? Well, for starters, the environment is incredibly fragile and can be easily damaged. Plus, there are no native human populations on the continent, so your travels would essentially be like visiting an uninhabited island. And let's not forget that it's also one of the most expensive destinations to travel to. Despite all that, Antarctica is not exactly guarded like a fortress, but there is an international agreement called the Antarctic Treaty. This treaty was negotiated to prevent any unwanted activity on the continent and bans some forms of testing done there by member states. But the primary reason we can't just waltz into Antarctica is that it has a delicate ecosystem that needs protection. The treaty states that Antarctica should be used for peaceful purposes only and should be free from any human activity that could harm the environment. Scientists are still learning about the continent's unique ecosystem, and our activity and machines could disrupt the delicate balance that exists there. If you're still itching to go to Antarctica, getting permission isn't exactly a walk in the park. U.S. citizens, for example, need to complete a special form and send it to the Office of Ocean and Polar Affairs. And once you're there, you'll need to follow some strict guidelines to protect the environment, like not disturbing any wildlife or taking souvenirs like rocks, plants, or animals. Now, technically, can you live in Antarctica? While there are no laws banning people from living there permanently, it's a very inhospitable environment and unsuitable for human habitation. Temperatures can reach -76 degrees Fahrenheit and below, making it nearly impossible for anyone to survive without the proper equipment and experience. Plus, the nearest piece of land is over 1,000 miles away, making any inhabitants completely cut off from the rest of the world. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll get the chance to visit this unique and fascinating continent. But until then, let's admire it from afar. Let's now talk a bit about the discovery of Antarctica. Unlike other places that were already inhabited, Antarctica never had a native human population. Ancient Greek philosophers had an idea about the continent and called it Antarctos, meaning opposite the bear. The bears it refers to are not the polar ones though, but rather the Great and Little Bear constellations, which are only observable in the northern hemisphere. As a result, the term signifies the opposite of the land of the bear. Whaling and sealing voyages in the late 1700s and early 1800s would venture further south when rounding Cape Horn at the tip of South America. It was known that going further south often meant stronger winds, but also the risk of hitting floating ice of all sizes and of winds and seas that could prove dangerous to the ship and crew. Captain James Cook was the first to cross the Antarctic Circle on January 17, 1773, in the Ross Sea region. He reached a point further north a year later, and though he didn't sight land, he came to within 50 miles and saw deposits of rock held in icebergs, indicating that a more southerly land existed. The first sighting of Antarctica is widely acknowledged to have taken place in January of 1820, during the voyage of two ships under the command of Captain Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen, as part of a 2-year exploratory expedition around the world to discover new lands. The captain's ships were the first to have crossed the Antarctic Circle since Cook. The first undisputed landing on Antarctica didn't happen until much later, on January 24, 1895, at Cape Adare during the whaling voyage of the ship Antarctic, led by Henrik Bull. A small boat with 6 or possibly 7 men on board rowed ashore during calm conditions. You might not believe it, but Antarctica is actually a desert. With all that ice, you'd think it'd be like a winter wonderland with snowball fights and hot cocoa all day long. When we think of deserts, we picture camels and cacti and people struggling to find water. But in Antarctica, it's a whole different story. The struggle isn't to find water, it's to find anything that's not covered in ice. And the average rainfall has been just over 0.4 inches in the past 30 years. That's like a few drops of rain compared to what we're used to. So technically, it's not the dunes or sizzling heat that makes a desert, well, a desert. It's the lack of precipitation. But don't worry, if you ever find yourself lost in Antarctica, you won't have to worry about getting thirsty. Just make sure you bring a jacket and some mittens, because it's cold enough to make you into a popsicle. Not only is Antarctica one of the driest places on Earth, but it's also the coldest, the windiest, and the highest. Talk about overachieving. The penguins and scientists down in Antarctica have at times found themselves in a bit of a pickle when it comes to time. You see, unlike the rest of us on this big blue planet, there is no Antarctica time zone. All the lines of longitude meet at a single point at the South Pole, making it a bit of a head-scratcher when trying to figure out what time it is. Now, you might be thinking, but how do the scientists and researchers keep track of time down there? Good question. They typically stick to the time zone of the country they departed from. However, with stations from all over the world on the Antarctic Peninsula, things can get a little wacky. Imagine trying to coordinate with your neighboring countries without accidentally waking them up in the middle of the night. You might think that not much could survive in a place where the temperature is extremely cold, the sun barely shows up, and the wind could blow you away faster than a tumbleweed. Well, as in many places on Earth, life found a way in Antarctica too. Believe it or not, this frozen continent is buzzing with activity. It's home to billions of krill, which in turn attract lots of seals and more penguins than you can shake a fish at. But don't let their cute and cuddly appearance fool you. Penguins are the ultimate swimmers, with streamlined bodies that would make Olympic medal winners jealous. They come ashore to breed and chill, but their real talent is stealing pebbles from each other and forming mathematically precise huddles to stay warm. Antarctica is also home to the largest species of penguin on Earth. It's called the emperor penguin. Sure, these creatures are flightless birds, but that doesn't mean they can't jump. In fact, some of them can leap up to 120 inches. And let's not forget about the seals. With their furry bodies and special songs, these marine mammals are protected by the Antarctic Treaty, and they're thriving in the cool waters of the Southern Ocean too. But the real stars of the show are the whales. During the Antarctic summer, these huge creatures show up in droves to chow down on the abundant krill. It's indeed like a whale buffet down there.
Our planet sure is full of mysterious, unbelievable places. But here's a list of spots that look like they came straight out of a sci-fi movie. I bet you'll be Googling them later to see if they are truly real or not. If I asked you to think of the coldest place on Earth, you'd probably say it's somewhere in Antarctica or the North Pole, right? But what if I asked you to name the coldest cities on Earth, one where people actually live? Well, think Winnipeg in Canada, which once got as cold as the uninhabited planet of Mars. It so happens that on one of its warmest days, Mars's surface temperature reached a maximum of -20 degrees Fahrenheit. That same day, stiff northerly winds made the air temperature feel like -40 degrees Fahrenheit. That meant that exposed skin could freeze in less than 5 minutes. Yeah, the same thing took place on Earth, in Winnipeg. Even in these extreme days, people have to carry out their daily activities. See those shopping bags hanging on apartment windows? Well, people use the outside air to keep some of their food frozen, since they basically live inside a mega freezer. In Winnipeg, you'll find your share of cold day experiments, like people that boil water just to take it outside, throw it up in the air, just to watch it freeze mid-throw. Yes, it's that cold. Oh well, I guess I won't be visiting anytime soon. Now, all the way down in Senegal, Africa, one bears witness to an unbelievable sight. Some 18 miles north of Dakar, the country's capital, lies a unique lake. Arriving there, you might think you're walking out of a spaceship and onto an unknown planet. After all, have you ever seen real-life pink water before? The so-called Lake Retba, or Lac Rose, as known by locals, has become internationally famous for shining in its vivid pink color. And yes, you can swim there if you'd like, but you should know the water is extremely salty. Lake Retba is known to be one of the world's saltiest lakes, with a saline level of over 40%. And in case you're wondering why the water is pink, I assure you this has nothing to do with otherworldly factors. It's actually due to the high levels of salt. The algae known as Dunaliella salina is the one responsible for the pink shading. These algae produced red pigments that absorb sunlight, giving the lake its striking pink color. But if you'd like to catch the lake in its brightest color, you should go during the dry season, between November and June. In other months, the rainwater dilutes the pigments and its color becomes less distinct. Lake Retba has turned into a highly famous international attraction in recent times, since after all, who wouldn't love a picture swimming in an infinity of pink? The island of New Zealand is traditionally known for its scenic landscapes, but hidden inside a few isolated caves in the country's North Island lies a wondrous underground phenomenon too surreal to be true. To access this natural wonder, you have to descend over 150 feet through a labyrinth of caves that get darker and darker by the minute. You'll reach places of complete darkness. There, standing majestically glued to the cave ceilings, you'll see New Zealand's native glowworms. These glowworms are the larval forms of a species of fungus that are endemic to the country. They're a strange luminescent species that thrive only in the depths of the earth. Day or night, they'll be down there twinkling their blue light, hoping to attract unsuspecting prey. If you are lucky enough to tour around these caves, you'll feel like you're floating inside a galaxy, while thousands of living stars sparkle above you, reflecting their glow into the waters beneath your boat. Speaking of caves, Mexico is home to one of the world's most astounding caves, the so-called Cave of Crystals. If you think you've seen giant crystals before, wait until you check these out. Around 1910, a team of miners was digging a shaft in the outskirts of Nica, a town located in the Chihuahua province in Mexico. At around 390 feet, they found a large cave filled with clear selenite crystals. Now, jump another 90 years to the time when another team of miners dug further into the ground, reaching a depth of around 980 feet, when they found something much more surprising. It was a cave filled with impossibly large crystals, some measuring up to 39 feet long and weighing up to 55 tons. Science explains that 26 million years ago, the cave was filled with mineral-rich hot water, which allowed for the formation and growth of such huge selenite columns. The Nica crystals are believed to be the biggest ones in the world, making a human that stands beside it look like a very tiny creature. Oh, and speaking of standing inside the cave, conditions there are far from welcoming to us humans. Temperatures reach 136 degrees Fahrenheit, and the air is filled with 99% humidity, making it extremely difficult to breathe without the help of protective gear. And even so, a person can only last up to 20 to 30 minutes down there. The Quang Sai Falls, which are located about 18 miles south of the city of Luang Prabang in Laos, is a complex waterfall formation. Because of the bedrock in the region, the waterfall was developed in a highly unusual way. It's a three-tiered waterfall, which is at first a series of shallow pools on the cliff edge that ultimately lead to the main fall that has a drop of around 200 feet. As soon as you see this place, it becomes clear why it's one of the most popular relaxation spots for tourists in the country. The water is clear and turquoise, and virtually every angle makes for a perfect photo op. Beyond the falls themselves, the area is covered in lush green vegetation and has a wide tropical jungle to explore. It has been deemed one of the most astonishing waterfalls in the world. Mauritius is known for its idyllic beaches and crystal clear sea, but there's an unbelievable phenomenon at the southwest corner of the island that appears to be an underwater waterfall. Despite how it looks, this isn't a flowing region of water, but instead an optical illusion that happens because of the seafloor structure. The island sits on an ocean shelf that is no more than 500 feet deep. At the edge of the shelf, however, it soon plunges to depths of 2.5 miles. So what you're seeing there is not an underwater waterfall, but rather you're witnessing particles of sand that are being pushed over by the current. I'd say a boat ride over that area would be rad. Now this next sight will either give you goosebumps or make you marvel at its weirdness. I'd say it depends on the time of day you visit. Next to the small town of Gryfino in Poland, you'll find a very unusual sight. A pine tree forest where each tree is bent at its base. If you visit the crooked forest during the daytime, I'm guessing you'll be fascinated by these sharp 90-degree curves. No, you can't use their trunks as a stool if you decide on having a picnic, but that would be cool. Visiting the site at night will most likely give you constant chills. There's a thin layer of fog that hovers around, making the forest seem quite unwelcoming. And then, there's the fact that science still can't explain why the trees are the way they are. Madagascar is usually thought of as a place with unparalleled amount of biodiversity, but its geographical features are equally impressive. The Stone Forest, which is located within the Singi Debamara Nature Reserve, began life hundreds of millions of years ago as a lagoon. Today, with the help of erosion, you'll find a series of towers with deep canyons between them. The reserve is huge, stretching over 375,600 acres. But it's the height that gets scary. Some of the rock's pinnacles can stretch up to 500 feet high. In the local language, Singi means where one cannot walk barefoot. The word refers to the tall, needle-like rock formations that can be found throughout the reserve. So, if you ever do go visit, make sure to have some high-quality hiking shoes on you.
Do you know that NASA explores not only stars, planets, galaxies, or black holes? Hard to believe, but yes. The agency also works on discoveries here on our home planet Earth. So what has NASA recently discovered? Is there life under the ice? While they were analyzing data recently, they discovered something unbelievable hiding under Antarctica's ice. And this discovery not only changes everything we know about the whole water system of the Earth, but it may also help with research about life in space. Humankind's existence might depend on understanding Antarctica and its secrets. So, the recent discoveries reveal vital information about our survival. But before we continue, let's see how much you know about this place, where it's only ice as far as your eyes can see. Antarctica is one of the world's 7 continents in the southern hemisphere. It's the 5th largest continent in terms of total area, and that means it's almost twice the size of Australia. Want to see real meteorites? Go to Antarctica. Due to its dry climate, Antarctica is one of the best places to observe space. But what's even greater is that you can find meteorites on the white surface of the continent. Scientists have already plucked about 45,000 meteorites from the ice, and they think they can see another 300,000. Since there aren't many terrestrial rocks there, it's easy for them to spot them, thanks to their dark color. Antarctica's dry desert environment also helps preserve them, even the ones that fell to Earth more than 1 million years ago. And can you imagine any volcanic activity in Antarctica? It's hard. But this place is where fire meets the ice. West Antarctica is where most volcanic activity occurs. Scientists recently found that 138 volcanoes exist in West Antarctica alone. Wow! You would think that Antarctica is always cold, but no. Its coastal regions can get as warm as 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But have you ever wondered what Antarctica would look like if there were no ice? It may seem unimaginable now, but it was not always covered by ice. That was 34 million years ago, though, so nobody could tell how the continent's surface would be without the ice. But NASA changed that. They generated computer simulations and created the most accurate map of it as of today. What they saw was incredible. The continent was not flat at all like it seemed. It's pretty bumpy with valleys, rolling plains, and high mountains. But this was nothing next to what they had discovered under Antarctica's ice. So, what is it? Drum roll, please. NASA found 2 new subglacial lakes. And what's even cooler about it is that they spotted these lakes from space. How is that? If your answer is high-tech satellites, then you're right. In 2003, NASA launched a satellite called IceSat. It measured ice sheet mass balance and cloud and aerosol heights. The satellite also helped create the ice-free map of Antarctica. In 2010, the European Space Agency launched the second satellite, CryoSat-2. It was for tracking the changes in the thickness of the ice. Then, in 2018, NASA launched the third one, IceSat-2, a follow-on to the IceSat spacecraft. It measured ice sheet elevation and sea ice thickness. It was NASA's most advanced Earth-observing laser instrument. It delivered the highest precision data. And when that was combined with the data from the other satellites, it was possible to spot these 2 new lakes near a pair of larger ones. But how is it possible that these lakes exist in the first place? The average thickness of most Antarctica ice is approximately 1.2 miles. However, it can get over 1.8 miles thick in some places, especially during the winter. So, you might think that there's nothing under there, but science says otherwise. It's not quite possible to see it with your bare eyes, but the continent's ice is slowly but constantly flowing in different directions under the force of its weight. But scientists could not figure out how water moved for many years. That started to change in 2007, when data gathered from the IceSat provided insight into what hides beneath the surface. They first discovered an entire network of meltwater lakes connected under Antarctica's fast-flowing ice streams, and there were hundreds of them. Scripps Institution of Oceanography glaciologist Helen Amanda Fricker figured that the elevation changes measured by IceSat happened because of the dynamics of these lakes. They did not hold meltwater statically. Instead, they were filling and draining continuously over time through a system of waterways. And as they did that, the ice above rose and fell. But where do they drain? The ocean, of course, and it drains a lot. A recent study, co-authored by Fricker, found that the drainage of one lake flushed as much as 198 billion gallons into the ocean in only 3 days. Countless mysteries about how nature works are still waiting to be solved. But finding the 2 new lakes will give scientists a better picture of how fast the Antarctic ice sheet will change as the climate gets warmer, and how this will affect global ocean currents and sea level rise. The filling and draining cycle of the lakes also caused the ice sheet to suffer cracks and crevices. So, the information they find from these new lakes will also give them a better understanding of the damage on the surface of the ice. They will also be able to assess how this filling and draining system influences the speed at which ice slips into the oceans and seas. And that means they can evaluate how the added fresh water may alter marine ecosystems. This discovery may also suggest whether life is under the ice. Wow! Scientists drilled through about 3,504 feet of ice and found that water samples taken from one of the lakes contained approximately 10,000 bacterial cells per milliliter. Such a high number of bacterial life is a good sign, because that means the icy waters might also support higher life forms, such as microanimals, and one of these new lakes might even be their home. But the most exciting thing is that the new lakes might help them understand whether life on other planets is possible. Scientists believe any life below the frozen surface of the planet Mars might follow the patterns seen in Antarctica's lakes. So, there is a possibility that they might find critical new information on the type of life that may have existed on the red planet. You wouldn't want to be there during the winter, though. The lowest temperature on Earth you can experience is negative 128 degrees Fahrenheit. In 2010, there was an even lower temperature of negative 135 degrees Fahrenheit. And you may feel this cold much worse due to the strong and dry winds. Did you know that the size of the ice surface on Antarctica also changes throughout the year? It's about 1.2 million square miles during the summer, but when it's winter, it grows to 7.3 million square miles. Yet, despite the change, it remains the largest piece of ice on Earth. Sorry, Arctic, you lose. Do you know these cute little penguins? Consider these animals the locals because there is no native population in Antarctica. It's a no man's land because no single country owns it. But do you know who really owns it? 5 different species of penguins, seals, and killer whales. Ha ha. Despite the continent's harsh conditions, you can visit it as a tourist for fishing and research purposes. Around 5,000 people reside on the continent during summer at research stations. But when winter comes, the number naturally drops down to 1,000. Antarctica's ice blanket makes up 70% of the world's freshwater reserves. Imagine what would happen if it melted. The global sea levels would be raised by almost 200 feet.
The largest volcanic region on Earth is not in Africa or Japan, but under the ice of Antarctica. Scientists found 138 volcanoes in its western part, and if they decide to go wild, you'll surely notice it. They could melt huge amounts of ice that will move into the ocean, raise its level, and make our planet uninhabitable for humans. But before you pack your things to fly away to another planet, hear me out. Only 2 of the Antarctic volcanoes are officially classified as active now. And it would take a whole series of eruptions, decade after decade, to seriously impact the whole world. Mount Erebus, one of the 2 Antarctic volcanoes currently in action, proudly bears the title of the world's southernmost active one. It has been continuously erupting since at least 1972. It emits plumes of gas and steam and sometimes even spews out rocks, and scientists call it Strombolian eruptions. One of the coolest features is a lava lake in one of its summit craters, with molten material on the surface. Such lakes are rather rare because they need certain conditions to make sure the surface never freezes over. The second active volcano is Deception Island, a horseshoe-shaped landmass. It is the caldera of an active volcano that last erupted over 50 years ago. Scientists who monitor it say it shouldn't go wild anytime soon. Antarctica also has plenty of fumaroles. Those are volcanic vents that release gases and vapors into the air. In the right conditions, they can spew out enough stuff to build fumarolic ice towers up to 10 feet tall. Scientists keep an eye on the Antarctic volcanoes with seismometers that detect when the Earth starts trembling from volcanic activity. Sometimes they also use more complicated tech, but it's all really challenging because of how far away this polar region is and how tricky it is to get there. That's why no one can predict when one of the continent's volcanoes that are now sleeping might erupt. We can guess what this waking up would look like if we analyze the events from nearly 20,000 years ago. So, shall we? One of Antarctica's sleeping volcanoes, Mount Takahe, had a series of eruptions and spewed out a good amount of halogens rich in ozone back then. Some scientists say these events warmed up the southern hemisphere. Glaciers started to melt and help finish the last ice age. For these events to repeat, we'd need a series of eruptions with substances rich in halogens from one or more volcanoes that are now above the ice. It's an unlikely scenario, but since it already happened in the past, it's not completely impossible. As for volcanoes hiding under a thick layer of ice, it looks like their gases would hardly make it to the atmosphere, but they would be strong enough to melt huge caverns in the base of the ice and produce a serious amount of meltwater. The West Antarctic ice sheet is wet and not frozen to its bed, So this meltwater would work as a lubricant and set the overlying ice into motion soon. The volume of water that even a large volcano would generate in this way is nothing compared to the volume of ice beneath it. So a single eruption wouldn't make a difference. But several volcanoes erupting close to or beneath any of the western Antarctica's big ice streams would. Those ice streams are rivers of ice that take most of the frozen water in Antarctica into the ocean. If they change their speed and bring unusual amounts of water into the ocean, its level will rise. As the ice would get thinner and thinner, there would be more and more new eruptions. Scientists call it a runaway effect. Something like that happened in Iceland. The number of volcanic eruptions went up when glaciers started to recede at the end of the last ice age. So it looks like, for massive changes, several powerful volcanoes above the ice with gases full of halogens need to get active within a few decades of each other and stay strong over many tens to hundreds of years. Antarctica stores around 80% of all the fresh water in the world, and if they melted all of it, global sea levels would rise by almost 200 feet. And then we'd have to look for a new planet to live on. But this again is an unlikely scenario. It's more likely that the eruptions under the ice will lubricate ice streams and seep water into the ocean. But it wouldn't be the end of the world. A super strong, super angry supervolcano could do it though, and it has already happened in the past. Over 200 million years ago, the world went through a major makeover with not one, not two, but 4 massive volcanic eruptions in huge pulses. The supervolcano called Camp had been erupting over and over for 600,000 years. It all happened in Wrangell, a large chunk of land that used to be a supermassive volcano stretching across what's now British Columbia and Alaska. And it wasn't the lava or the volcanic ash that ruined the environment. The eruption made carbon levels skyrocket. The planet would never be the same again. This volcanic activity might have helped dinosaurs grow from cat-sized critters into giants we saw in Jurassic Park. It kicked off a 2-million-year rainy season. It made the whole world hot and humid, and the dinos just loved it. Researchers dug deep into sediment layers beneath an ancient lake in Asia to uncover these secrets. They found traces of volcanic ash and mercury, clear signs of those epic eruptions. There were carbon signatures showing huge spikes in carbon dioxide levels. It made the atmosphere toasty, and the rain poured down. So the bad news is, another eruption like this could happen. The supervolcano beneath Yellowstone National Park has been sleeping for nearly 70,000 years. But if it wakes up, it would be many times more catastrophic than the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. It's considered the most disastrous volcanic eruption in U.S. history. It followed 2 months of earthquakes and injection of magma below the volcano that weakened and destroyed the entire north face of the mountain. The eruption column went 80,000 feet into the atmosphere and spread ash over 11 U.S. states and several Canadian provinces. The last Yellowstone eruption was 1,000 times greater than that. The ground above Yellowstone sits on a hot spot made of molten and semi-molten rock called magma. This magma stuff flows into a chamber beneath the park, about 4 to 6 miles down, making the ground puff up like a balloon. But then, as it cools down, the ground goes back to its usual state. Volcano watchers have been keeping an eye on this for a century. They noticed the ground lift up about 10 inches around 20 years ago, but since 2010, it's been going back down. The experts say we have no big eruptions on the horizon, so doomsday isn't coming anytime soon. But there's some underground activity going on lately which keeps us interested. Since humans haven't been around to witness every little thing Yellowstone does, it's kind of tough to say for sure what's brewing down there. Yellowstone has had some epic eruptions within the last couple million years. They happen like clockwork, with gaps of 600,000 to 800,000 years between them. The last big one was around 640,000 years ago, and it basically reshaped the entire landscape, spreading ash and debris as far as Louisiana. You can still see the aftermath of the last big eruption in the Yellowstone caldera today. Experts say a massive eruption like the last one is an unlikely scenario. We're more likely to see eruptions of steam and hot water or lava flows. When and with what force it will wake up remains a mystery to scientists.
The North Atlantic was a frozen grave on the night when the Titanic sank. With too few lifeboats, hundreds of people were left to their fate. Yet somehow, despite the lack of lifeboats, Charles Joffin, the Titanic's chief baker, survived. Left behind on deck by the more affluent, he went down with the ship. For 2 hours, he floated in sub-zero water, awake and alive, and basically defying science. The night of April 14, 1912 was brutally cold. When the Titanic went under, the North Atlantic swallowed the ship whole, and with it, about 1,500 lives. But most people didn't drown. Horrifyingly, they froze. The ocean was around 28 degrees Fahrenheit. It's colder than ice water. In water like that, your body almost immediately goes into panic mode. It means that your blood starts rushing from your hands and feet to protect your more vital organs, the heart and brain. You begin to shake, then you go numb. Your thoughts slow down, your memory slips, and very soon, you can't move anymore. After a few minutes, you lose control, and a little later, you pass out. Then the heart just stops. It can take less than an hour for a person to pass away that way. And the rescue ship Carpathia didn't reach the wreck for nearly 2 hours. For most people left floating in the frozen ocean that night, the fight was basically against time. But let's get back to the beginning of that fateful night, and to one specific person. Charles Joffin was the chief baker of the Titanic. No wonder he was on board for the ship's first trip. The man wasn't a rookie. He came from the Olympic, a British ocean liner launched in 1910. On the Titanic, Charles had a solid job, good pay, and a crew of 13 bakers under him. So life was good, and the ship was huge, spotless, and unsinkable. Then came the night of April 14th. Charles was off duty, lying in his bunk mid-ship. Suddenly, there was a deafening bang, and a shudder ran through the whole hull. It wasn't exactly loud, but it was still sharp enough to snap the man awake. He sat up right away, listening, but could hear nothing but muffled voices and the hum of engines. There were no official orders or panic. At the same time, he felt that something was wrong. Charles decided that if something was up, people might need food. So he rounded up his baking crew, told them to grab loaves, 4 each, and haul them up to the lifeboats. It was past midnight and the corridors were dim. Here and there, confused passengers were murmuring to each other. Third-class families were already trying to find their way up, clutching suitcases and babies, even though the stewards were yelling, trying to calm everyone down. Charles got the bread stashed in the lifeboats, then briefly visited his cabin again. When he headed up again around 12:30, the air was way colder, and he could already feel the tilt. Still small, but very real. On deck, Boat 10, his assigned one, was waiting for him. People had gathered there, quiet but nervous. Chief Officer Wild was barking orders, telling men to stay back, but nobody was rushing anyway. There was no chaos, yet. People hadn't realized the tragedy that had been unfolding in front of their eyes yet. Joffin started helping load women and children. The boat was filling, but slowly, too slowly. Some women refused to go. They were convinced the ship was safer. What an irony. A few hours before disappearing forever, and people were still sure it couldn't sink. Charles and a few crew members went down to A deck, trying to find more women and kids. Some wouldn't move. Some were crying quietly. Some were just staring. The baker had to carry one woman with a child himself. By the time they got back, the ship was leaning to port and Boat 10 was swinging away from the hull. They had to throw people in now, literally tossing them across the gap. One woman slipped and fell between the lifeboat and the ship's steel wall. Miraculously, Steward William Burke grabbed her by the legs, holding her upside down until others pulled her up, saving her. Through all this, Joffin never got the order to board. Others climbed in. Burke, 2 seamen, but not him. So, he stayed on deck alone. He went back to his cabin, but now the water was in, up to his ankles, and creeping higher every second. The crewmen were struggling to shut watertight doors by hand. Charles headed back up and saw that the deck was empty. Every lifeboat was gone. He didn't panic. Instead, he started hurling deck chairs overboard, one after another, maybe 50 of them, hoping they'll float for someone later. And then at one point, the sound came. A deep, rattling crack. That was the ship's bones snapping. The walls groaned. The floor trembled. Charles heard hundreds of footsteps above his head. People started pouring down from the upper decks. They were screaming and stumbling, some trying to climb railings and others falling. It was all chaos. The baker tried to move with the crowd, but the ship lurched hard to port, and people tumbled like dominoes. He somehow managed to stay upright and climbed up the starboard side. The deck was slanted like a rooftop, so Charles grabbed the rail, inching his way along as the ocean was rising below. And then it happened. The Titanic slid under the surface, not straight down, rather gliding. And Joffin rode it down like an elevator. The moment the ship's stern hit the surface, he stepped off into the freezing Atlantic. Miraculously, he didn't get sucked under or dragged down. He barely got his head wet. For hours, maybe two, he was floating, kicking and treading water. The sea was littered with debris and bodies, but he just kept going. His body was bound to shut down from the cold long ago, but for some mysterious reason, it didn't. At one point, he spotted something, a half-sunken, collapsible lifeboat. Around 20 men were standing on it, soaked and shivering. He swam closer and tried to climb up, but they shoved him back. There was no room. So he drifted nearby, just hanging on, until one man, Isaac Maynard, reached out and grabbed his hand. And they stayed like that, hand in hand in the icy water. Then another lifeboat appeared maybe 50 yards away. Someone yelled that they could take 10 more people. Without a second thought, Joffin let go, swam toward it, and they pulled him aboard. Later, he said something unbelievable, that he actually felt colder sitting in that boat than when he was floating in the Atlantic. When the Carpathia finally arrived, he was still alive, but barely. His feet were swollen and his legs were numb. He had to climb the rescue ship's ladder on his knees, but he made it. Charles Joffin wasn't just another survivor. He was basically a living document of the Titanic tragedy. I bet you don't hear his name as often as the famous ones, but you probably should. When he gave his testimony to the British Inquiry, he didn't hold back. His statement was detailed and clear, one of the most complete accounts ever given by a crew member who worked below deck. But you know the most astonishing thing? After everything he went through, after surviving one of the worst maritime disasters in history, he went back to sea. He didn't hide from the ocean. For decades, he worked on ship after ship. From the 1920s through the early 40s, Joffin kept sailing, baking bread on the open sea. And fate didn't exactly give him an easy ride. In 1941, while working aboard the SS Oregon off Nantucket, disaster struck again. The ship went down. 17 people didn't make it. But somehow, Joffin survived again. In other words, this man outlived not one, but two shipwrecks and kept doing what he loved. And when he finally passed at the age of 78, it wasn't the sea that took him.
Here you are in a park, enjoying a normal day, when suddenly, dark, muddy clouds appear above you. But this doesn't last minutes or hours. It goes on for weeks, and everything around you is slowly starving for sunlight. This is exactly what happens on the ocean floor, and scientists gave it a name. They call it marine dark waves. You may have heard of underwater heat waves. This is when the ocean gets way too hot and stays this way for weeks or months. This happens because the ocean acts like a giant sponge for the planet. When the atmosphere traps heat from the sun, the ocean soaks it up. Sometimes, warm currents get trapped in one spot, like hot water swirling in a bathtub, slowly cooking everything trapped inside. The heat wipes out stuff that can't move, like corals or seagrass, while fish either flee to cooler waters or struggle as oxygen levels drop. Because these plants and reefs sit at the base of the food web, the damage ripples through the entire ocean ecosystem. Marine heat waves are a huge problem. However, dark waves are almost equally bad, but in a completely different way. A marine dark wave is obviously not about the heat. It's about light suddenly disappearing where it's supposed to exist. If we can imagine the ocean like a giant glass building, where sunlight normally pours through windows and lights up every floor, dark waves would be like someone filling that building with thick smoke. It happens when the water gets clogged with a thick, swirling soup of turbid matter. The water itself becomes a light-eating fog. Basically, mud, sand, algae, and all kinds of microscopic organic junk get stirred up and suspended in the water, scattering and absorbing sunlight before it can reach the seafloor. When it gets thick enough, the seafloor disappears into darkness. This starves any life at the bottom that depends on the sun for food. And the strange thing is, we're not talking about a deep dark ocean miles below, where sunlight never reaches anyway. All of this happens near the coast, right in the shallow parts where underwater plants need the sun to survive. What makes dark waves especially tricky is how easy they are to miss. From the surface, everything can look normal, even to satellites. You can park a boat on top of a dark wave and still not notice anything weird. That's why this phenomenon went largely unnoticed and wasn't properly studied until recently. To properly catch whatever was turning off lights at the seafloor, scientists started cross-referencing data like detectives. They had to dig through archives and build a kind of time machine out of old data. They gathered 16 years of continuous light readings taken directly from the bottom of the Santa Barbara Channel. Then they matched that with more than 20 years of satellite-based light data from the coast of New Zealand. They essentially rewound the security camera footage of the ocean for the last 2 decades to see what they had missed. With all that data combined, researchers found a specific event in New Zealand where the seafloor received almost no usable sunlight for 64 days. Imagine if the sun set on the 1st of November and didn't rise again until after New Year's Day. If that happened on land, it would be a disaster for anything that needs sunlight to grow. Think about your houseplants. If you shoved a fern in a closet for a week, it would probably look a bit sad, but it'd bounce back. But if you left it in there for 2 months, it'd turn yellow and slowly wither away. On a larger scale, if a forest lost the sun for 64 days, the undergrowth would rot. That would cause deer and other animals to run out of food, and the whole food chain would get shaky. It's a similar biology for the underwater world, because it also needs the sun. Down there, instead of pine trees and grass, you have giant kelp forests and seagrass meadows. They're like the oxygen gas stations of the sea. They take sunlight and turn it into fuel for the entire ecosystem. When a long dark wave hits, it drains their batteries until nothing grows back. The same thing happens to kelp. It starts to deteriorate. The fish that munch on it go hungry, and suddenly, a vibrant underwater city turns into an underwater ghost town. Marine dark waves don't just affect underwater plants. They can even affect those higher up on the food chains. We often assume that sea animals hunt by scent, but they actually depend heavily on sunlight. Many sharks and large fish rely on sunlight in contrast to hunt. They're built to spot dark shapes moving against brighter water, especially when sunlight filters down through clear water. Think of it like watching shadows move behind a white curtain. Even in low light, that contrast pops. But a marine dark wave wipes that away. The water turns cloudy, the background goes dark, and the silhouettes simply disappear. Sharks still have other senses, like picking up tiny electrical signals from nearby animals, but that only works when they're close. They're not blind, but it feels like trying to hunt in a room filled with thick smoke. You can still feel things close by, but anything further away is invisible. Apex predators don't pass away easily, but their hunting efficiency drops, which changes who eats, who escapes, and who goes hungry. That confusion stretches all the way to the docks. Fishing towns depend on marine life behaving predictably. If fish can't feed, they move on. That leaves nets empty and boats coming back light. Boat captains can read a weather radar to dodge a storm, but there is no forecast for the ocean running out of light. It also creates a headache for professionals working below the surface. Sonar helps, but divers and research teams still use their eyes. A dark wave alters how light travels through the water, turning a familiar worksite into a murky haze. Navigation becomes a guess. Surveys fail. It is a new stress factor, one the experts never planned for because, until recently, it wasn't even recognized. We've talked about how dark waves happen, but what triggers them? Well, most of the time, it's something loud and chaotic on the surface. Events like major storms and floods, rivers exploding with runoff. When huge storms hit land, they tear soil, mud, and organic matter off the landscape and flush it straight out into the ocean. All that material spreads out into massive underwater plumes that can turn clear coastal water into chocolate milk almost overnight. Scientists can spot surface sediment plumes clearly, but they can't always tell you how dark it gets down on the seafloor. Coastlines darken as sediment clouds expand. The sun might be shining above, but the water is so full of particles that no light can get through. Coastal currents often trap this murky water in place, so the darkness lingers long after the rain stops. That's why dark waves often show up after extreme weather. This creates a deceptive gap. The storm passes, and we assume the recovery has started. But underwater, the water column is still loaded with light-blocking debris. What looks like a return to normal on the surface is actually weeks of extended gloom below. As storms get stronger, we see more of these dark wave situations showing up. The ocean is getting slammed with intense mud and organic plume events that are causing this. Heavy rain leads to more floods and landslides, turning rivers into speedy conveyor belts that dump tons of soil and debris into the sea. Even after the storm passes, waves and currents can keep that cloudy mess swirling around, making the water stay murky for a while, like a shaken snow globe. So, what's next? Scientists are finally taking marine dark waves seriously instead of brushing them off as some spooky ocean myth. Now that we've got a name for these lights-out events and a way to track them, the next step is simple. We need to set up more light sensors in key spots. We also need to figure out how dark waves relate to storms, runoff, and algae blooms. Finally, we need to pinpoint the moment when ecosystems can't bounce back anymore. Basically, we're creating an underwater sunlight weather report because it turns out the ocean just doesn't have storms and heat waves. Sometimes it has its own kind of eclipse.
If you set foot in what used to be the Aral Sea, you'll feel salt and dust. But it wasn't always like that. In just a few decades, one of the largest lakes on Earth turned into a desert. Now, things are starting to change. The water and the fish are slowly coming back. That gives us hope, sure. But can an environment that collapsed this badly really recover? Well, maybe. But first, let's look at the facts. The Aral Sea was a lake in the middle of a dry desert region in Central Asia. It was huge, almost twice the size of Belgium. Its water came mostly from two rivers, the Amu Darya in the south and the Sir Darya in the northeast, and the lake was full of life. Carp, bream, and other fish thrived there. People lived along its shores, made their living from fishing, and sailed across its waters. But every so often, the same thing would happen. The Amu Darya would shift away from the sea and the lake would shrink. But it never lasted forever. Eventually, the river would shift back and the Aral Sea would recover. It was a cycle that had repeated for thousands of years. Until one decision changed everything. In the early 1960s, the white gold boom began, and there was a major push to grow cotton. The plan was to grow it on a massive scale and export it, and it worked for a while. The region seemed to have the best of both worlds. On one side, there was the Aral Sea, full of fish and making the area less dry. On the other, there was the cotton industry, bringing in real money. The plan was thriving, and Uzbekistan became one of the world's largest cotton exporters by 1988. But the success came with a serious problem. Cotton seeds need a lot of water. So water from the Amu Darya and Sir Darya was diverted to irrigate fields in the desert before it could even reach the Aral Sea. And in such a dry region, rain and groundwater could not make up for the loss. The water was evaporating faster than the rivers could replace it, and it wasn't just cotton. Farmers also grew crops like melons, rice, and cereals. This whole farming system also wasted a lot of water. Many of the canals were poorly built, so water leaked out or evaporated before it ever reached the fields. Unfortunately, the Aral Sea had shrunk to just 10% of its original size by 2007, and people started talking about an ecosystem collapse. The sea had broken apart into 3 smaller lakes. 2 of them became so salty that fish could no longer survive. Towns that once sat on the shore were left behind, and huge areas of the old seabed dried out completely. As the Aral Sea dried up, everything left behind became more concentrated. Salt, dust, pesticides, and other chemicals built up in the remaining water and across the exposed seabed. Then the wind made everything worse. It lifted that dry, toxic dust into the air and carried it across nearby towns and fields. People were breathing it in. Some of that toxic dust ended up in local drinking water. Some of it landed on crops. Animals ate those crops, and little by little, those chemicals made their way into people's food. The result was hard to ignore. Fresh water became hard to find, and health problems became common. People in the area began dealing with breathing issues, stomach problems, anemia, infections, and more. The dust also made farming harder and brought more water shortages. As the wind dropped salt onto the fields, crops struggled to grow or just wouldn't grow at all. In the worst areas, farmers had to wash the land again and again just to clear away the salt and chemicals. If it wasn't obvious by now, I'll just say it. In the long run, the cotton plan was a huge mistake. The Aral Sea nearly vanished, and today it's often described as the first major human-made ecological disaster of the modern era. So now comes the big question. If people can create an ecological disaster, can we also undo it? The honest answer is, we don't fully know yet, but there is hope. Today, the Aral Sea has become a place for new experiments. Experiments that could teach us how to help other rivers and lakes facing the same future. In theory, the solution is pretty simple. Stop taking so much water from the rivers that feed the Aral Sea, and eventually, the lake would come back. The region does have water. You see, even though the Aral Sea basin is dry, rivers still carry fresh water down from melting snow and glaciers in the Pamirs and Tian Shan Mountains to the east. If that water were left to flow naturally, it could help rebuild the lake before the end of the century. Great, but that's where we run into a huge problem. 5 countries depend on that same water. Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan use that water to run dams and generate electricity. Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan send it through canals to irrigate farms, especially cotton fields. That water supports jobs, exports, and entire local economies. So fully restoring the Aral Sea would mean taking water away from all that for at least 30 to 40 years. And that's where the simple solution becomes a very difficult one. But people are trying. In 2005, Kazakhstan built an 8-mile-long dike that helped stabilize the North Aral Sea. 2 years after it was built, the first signs of recovery appeared. The water level rose, and the salt levels dropped. Soon, fish like carp, saber, and pike perch were swimming there again. In neighboring Uzbekistan, another effort is underway. They're planting millions of saxaul trees across the former lakebed. These tough trees can survive in the desert, and their roots help hold the soil in place, reducing the dust and sandstorms that blow across the region. These are all promising efforts, and they do give us hope. But none of this changes the biggest challenge of all. Farmers there still grow a lot of cotton and rice, and both crops need huge amounts of water. In fact, Uzbekistan's cotton harvest has actually grown since 2020. So if the goal is to bring more water back to the Aral Sea, The first step would be to change what people grow in the region. That means choosing crops that need less water, like vegetables, fruit, or winter wheat. It's unrealistic to think the RLC will return to the levels it had in the 1960s. But changing the types of crops grown in the region could be a huge step toward reversing part of this ecological disaster. The damage built up over generations, so even in the best-case scenario, it would still take generations more to undo it. But experts are optimistic. Projects like these may not bring the whole RLC back, but they could return at least some water to the lake. Nature can be surprisingly resilient when it gets the chance to recover. For years, many people wrote the RLC off as a lost cause. Now, parts of it are slowly being restored. Recovery will take a long time, sure, but the RLC is not gone for good. For now, the RLC can still teach us something. Other lakes around the world are starting to face similar issues. Lake Chad in Central Africa, for example, has shrunk dramatically since the 1960s. The Salton Sea in Southern California is getting saltier because of irrigation problems. And in both places, people are still trying to figure out what to do before the damage goes too far. That's why the RLC matters beyond Central Asia. Its collapse and now its partial recovery could help other regions avoid the same path. And maybe in those cases, the goal won't be to reverse a catastrophe, but to stop one before it happens. The ground isn't shaking, it's pulsing under your feet. It feels like a steady heartbeat, but what would be beating deep inside a glacier? It's not an earthquake, and still it can be connected to a landslide that can trigger a devastating tsunami and wipe out a few towns. For more than 5 years straight, scientists kept their eyes on Berry Glacier in Alaska, all because this glacier is kinda shaky. Back in 2020, a research team from the University of Alaska basically put an unstable area of Berry Glacier under a microscope. They set up sensors everywhere, hoping to catch the very first warning signs, the geological equivalent of a loud crack before something collapses. The thing is, the ground was pulsing there. Tiny signals came and went, following a certain rhythm. No one could understand the reason. The mystery lingered until one day researchers realized the truth. The pulses turned out to be caused by water sneaking into cracks in the rock, freezing, thawing, and freezing again. It's like water wedging a door open little by little, and each freeze makes the cracks grow just a bit more. Over time, all that pressure might become the final nudge that will cause the whole slope to crash. And that's why everyone's watching Berry Glacier and Berry Arm Fjord so closely. The mountainside there is steep, cracked, and unstable. It's basically a giant stack of loose blocks held together by ice. If it suddenly gives way, millions of tons of rock could crash straight into the fjord below. That splash wouldn't just make a few waves, it would be a massive disaster. That unstable slope at Berry Arm is sitting right above the water. If it lets go, it could send a powerful wave racing across the water. For people out kayaking or boating nearby, that alone would be extremely dangerous. And in a worst-case scenario, places like Whittier could see waves up to about 7 feet high just from the initial impact. And that's not even the full nightmare version. If a huge chunk of the mountain collapses all at once, the wave right next to the slide could be absolutely massive, hundreds of feet tall inside Upper Berry Arm and Harriman Fjord. It'd be literally a wall of water. That energy wouldn't just stay there. Models show the tsunami could race about 30 miles down the sound and reach Whittier in roughly 20 minutes. Some estimates put the waves there at over 30 feet high. Even if the real wave ends up smaller than the worst-case models, it would still be strong enough to cause serious damage. And it's not just towns at risk. A tsunami like this could whip up violent currents and chaotic waves across the sound. This would put boats, cruise ships, and fishing vessels in real danger. On shore, docks, harbors, and other coastal infrastructure in Whittier could take a heavy hit. The effects wouldn't stop there either. Other coastal communities, including Chenango, Titulec, Valdez, and Cordova, could also feel the impact, depending on how the wave spreads. Tsunamis caused by landslides have already happened before, and they were devastating. For example, on May 18, 1980 at 8:32 a.m., a huge eruption blasted the north side of Mount St. Helens off. It turned out that magma had been creeping under the north slope, building a huge bulge. And when a 5.1 magnitude quake hit right under the bulging side, the slope slid away at mind-blowing speeds. That massive landslide, the largest on land ever recorded, tore down the mountain and smashed into Spirit Lake. All that rock displaced the water in a giant wave. It was taller than a skyscraper. The wave crashed back into the lake, ripping up trees, stumps, and debris, and creating an avalanche 295 feet tall. Some trees stayed intact, but most were sheared at the base by the super hot volcanic blast that followed seconds later. Most of the rubble traveled more than a dozen miles down the North Fork Toutle River, filling the valley with debris. It was similar to burying the valley in a wall of rock taller than the Statue of Liberty, and then some more. At the end, a huge area was covered with rocks and mud. Spirit Lake ended up 200 feet higher than before because of all that debris, and even 4 decades later, floating mats of logs still drift around the lake, pushed by the wind. But Alaska had an even crazier moment. It happened in the evening of July 9, 1958. That's when Latuya Bay got hit by a 7.8 to 8.3 magnitude earthquake. It happened on the Fairweather Fault, and it triggered a massive rock slide, crashing into the narrow inlet of the bay. The sound of the impact was heard from 50 miles away. All that rock splash sent a mega tsunami dashing through the bay, shredding trees, soil, and rocks to a height taller than the Empire State Building. Miraculously, only 5 people lost their lives, though many were injured. 2 fishermen on a boat were taken by the waves. 2 more, a captain and his 7-year-old son, got swept up in the tsunami, lifted high into the air, and survived with barely a scratch. Talk about a lucky break. The destruction didn't stop there. In Yucatan, the nearest town, bridges, docks, and oil lines got wrecked. A wave tower collapsed and a cabin was flattened. Underwater cables that ran Alaska's communication system snapped. The mega tsunami wiped out forests along the shoreline, leaving almost nothing standing except a few trees on the northern and southern edges. The water carved a damage line almost 700 feet around the bay. It's still visible from space today. But let's get back to Berry Glacier and the danger it poses. For a long time, scientists have been watching this area the old school way. You know, planes flying overhead, digging through old photos, and comparing notes from past studies. That stuff helps, but it can miss tiny, slow changes which are often the most important ones. And then, satellites came into play. They allowed scientists to add a powerful new tool called PS-INSAR. This is basically a way to spot ground movements so small you'd never see them with your eyes. This method is especially good at catching slow-motion shifts where the land is not cracking, but creeping. Let's see how it works. Satellites shoot radar waves down at Earth. Those waves hit the ground and bounce back up. The satellite times how long that bounce takes. If the ground is high, like a mountain, the signal comes back faster. If it's low, like a canyon, it takes longer. If you do this again and again, you can tell if the ground has moved, even by just a tiny bit. Now imagine the satellite doing this over and over as it circles the planet. Each pass adds another snapshot. Once you stack all those snapshots together, you get a super detailed picture of how the land is changing over time. The more passes the satellite makes, the clearer the story becomes. Using this method, researchers studied the Prince William Sound area with images from the Sentinel-1 satellites. They were focusing on months without snow, usually June through October from 2016 to 2020. Then they compared all that satellite data with older plane images and landslide records to see the changes. Satellites can scan huge areas at once while still catching tiny movements. And because they keep coming back to the same spot, scientists can track where the ground is shifted, how much it's moving, and whether that movement is speeding up or slowing down. The movement itself is called displacement, and it's a huge clue. Lots of data points mean a clearer picture. It's like watching a time-lapse instead of trying to guess using just a single photo. And since the land doesn't move at a steady pace, this helps scientists spot changes that could signal growing danger. So hopefully, we'll be able to catch it in time.
So here's the famous Grand Canyon in Arizona, a gigantic crack in the ground of incredible beauty and grandeur. Now, imagine it dozens of miles longer and lying at the bottom of the ocean. In fact, you don't have to imagine it, because you can see this scene in real life. A massive crack in the ocean floor lies about 620 miles west of Portugal. This mysterious rift is called the King's Trough Complex. It's a broad system of parallel trenches and basins descending into the dark depths of the Earth's crust. All of this awe-inspiring beauty stretches for about 310 miles. The deepest part of the system is known as Peak Deep. It's located at the eastern end and is one of the deepest places in the Atlantic Ocean. The Bermuda Triangle, the Mariana Trench, and other places, surrounded by mysteries, secrets, and legends, may fade into the background compared to the King's Trough Complex. There are no frightening stories or records of vanished ships here, but just imagine it. At the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, in icy waters where almost no light reaches, lies a giant unexplored rift. What's down there? What kind of creatures might be found? Perhaps there are remains of sunken ships. We are unlikely to find out anytime soon because reaching it is extremely difficult due to the immense pressure. For now, the only thing scientists truly understand is the origin of this underwater canyon. But first, let's look at how similar formations appear on the surface. The Grand Canyon, for example, was formed by a river. Meandering slowly over millions of years, it carved through the region, washing away and grinding down sedimentary rock. So here's the question. Do you think something similar happened to the floor of the Atlantic? Of course, there are no rivers there, but what about underwater currents? Could they have created such a giant, dark fissure reaching deep into the Earth's crust? Well, in fact, no. The origin of the King's Trough Complex is connected to the movement of tectonic plates and the thermal activity beneath them. But how did scientists determine the cause? Well, the rift lies deep underwater in complete darkness. That wasn't a problem for researchers. They sailed to the site on a research vessel and used a powerful sonar system to create a detailed map of the area. After obtaining a clear picture of the terrain, they selectively retrieved volcanic rock samples from different parts of the trench using a chain bag dredge. After that, they delivered the samples to laboratories for chemical analysis. All of this data helped scientists discover that between 37 and 24 million years ago, this part of the North Atlantic temporarily became a boundary zone between the European and African tectonic plates. Tectonic plates are enormous slabs of rock that cover the Earth's crust like a planetary-scale mosaic. They move, collide, overlap, and push away from one another. The King's Trough Complex formed during a period when the Earth's crust was splitting apart because of the movement of tectonic plates. It pulled away from east to west, resembling a giant zipper being undone. Now, in addition, scientists found evidence that the crust in this area was subjected to intense heating, rising from deep within the planet. Although researchers don't know exactly what occurred, it's likely that hot material, known as a mantle plume, rose toward the surface. All of these events deformed and fractured the Earth's crust, leaving us with what could be called an underwater Grand Canyon. But why are we interested in this at all? What does knowledge of events that happened tens of millions of years ago give us? Well, scientists now better understand how processes deep within the mantle can influence the movement of tectonic plates. This major research also provides insight into the geological evolution of the Atlantic seafloor. All of it helps humanity better understand similar processes taking place today. For example, near the Azores, another giant system of trenches known as the Tercera Rift is forming right now. What will happen next to this rift? Is such an event dangerous for people? One of the reasons scientists conduct these studies is to answer questions like these. It's unknown what secrets may still be hidden within that underwater fracture. But let's return to land and our beloved Grand Canyon. Even though it is famous worldwide, there are things inside this canyon that may surprise you. The Grand Canyon is ancient, yet it continues to change. Rock erosion happens slowly, but with each passing year, the canyon grows deeper and its shape evolves. Now, if you plan to visit the Grand Canyon, prepare for unpredictable weather. The canyon has its own climate, which can differ from the surrounding region. Because of the dramatic elevation changes, temperatures constantly shift. Snow may fall along the rim, while not far below, people inside the canyon enjoy warm sunshine. Walk a little farther and higher, and you might find yourself in the rain. Take shelter lower down, and you could end up surrounded by fog. So plan your route carefully and check forecasts from official weather services. There's both good and bad news for archaeologists. In the Grand Canyon, you can find ancient fossils of marine creatures more than 1 billion years old. In its caves, there are traces of land mammals dating back 10,000 years. The bad news is there are no dinosaurs here. The canyon most likely formed after those ancient reptiles became extinct. Now, one thing that may surprise you during a hike through the Grand Canyon is Supai Village, with a population of about 200 people. It's located at the base of the canyon within the Havasupai Indian Reservation. It's the most remote settlement in the continental U.S. and the only place in the country where mail is still delivered by pack mule. There are no roads leading to the village, and if you want to visit it, you'll need to prepare for a challenging hike along steep slopes under the blazing sun. Beyond its fascinating natural features, the Grand Canyon also has things that are almost fantastical and eerie, at least according to rumors and legends. For example, there's a hotel room known as the Grand Canyon Cavern Suite inside the canyon, deep within one of the caves. At a depth of 220 feet, guests find a luxurious room with all the comforts and, according to some accounts, something unsettling. Some visitors have reported stones moving inside the room, frightening dancing shadows, strange sounds, and movements near the bed where they were sleeping. You might also hear many local legends about spirits and monsters that inhabit the canyon. Of course, these are just stories, but some truly tragic events have taken place here. The canyon has become a grave for many people. Over time, around 800 people, according to official records, have passed away here. There were accidents, mysterious incidents, and real tragedies. For example, in 1956, 2 airplanes collided in the sky above the canyon. And that was far from the only case. So be careful when you come here. Stay away from the cliffs and keep close to your group. There is also a theory that ancient advanced civilizations once lived in the Grand Canyon. These rumors began in 1909 when a local newspaper published a major article claiming that 2 archaeologists from the Smithsonian Institution had discovered a secret tunnel filled with Egyptian artifacts and mummies. The Grand Canyon and ancient Egypt? How could that be possible, considering the vast distance between them? Soon after the article was published, the Smithsonian Institution issued a denial. No archaeologist from the institution had conducted such research, and certainly none had found Egyptian artifacts. Many believe the newspaper had published a hoax, although some suggest the institution deliberately concealed information about hidden discoveries. In any case, the story seems highly unlikely. Now, even though you know all this and want to see something similar yet different, you should travel to Tibet, where the Yarlung Zangpo Canyon is located. It is 2 miles deeper and 30 miles longer than the Grand Canyon. There, you would also see many fascinating